All right, today we're going to be doing something a little different. A number of you had wanted to hear my thoughts on a champion path tier list. I thought that sounded kind of fun, so that's what we're doing today. Now, a couple caveats before we get into it. First off, everything I say is going to be through the lens of playing at Covenant 10 and going up against the Titans. Additionally, it's with the assumption that you're going to be using a random clan combo and a random pyre. Some champions, or really clans as a whole, are going to be dramatically stronger with certain pairings over others. For instance, Wildenton, particularly Strangler Wildenton, or really Awoken in general, is going to be much, much stronger with Pyre of Savagery than really any other Pyre. So rather than talking about things only in terms of their ideal pairings, I'd rather talk about kind of the full spread of situations you're going to be faced with. Now, all that out of the way, let's actually get into it. We're going to be looking at this just alphabetically. So first up is Ardoon. Now, Ardoon in general is a pretty solid champion. He is certainly not the strongest. It's also not the weakest. He is pretty just decent kind of all the time. For his first path, we have Mystic Hammer. This is the path where he gets bonus attack during New Moon, and additionally gets an activated ability to phase to New Moon at will. I think this path pretty regularly gets underrated. I hear a lot of people saying it's his worst path and one of the worst paths in the game. I would pretty strongly disagree. Personally, I'd put it, I think, B tier. Now, there's a couple reasons for this. I think the main value of this path is how good it is early game. At rank 1, it has, at least as long as you have the New Moon bonus, it has the highest attack power of any champion path. It has higher attack power than Monstrous Penumbra. It has higher attack power than like Burn Bright Rector. All while being half the capacity of Penumbra and without the fiddliness of Burn Bright's Burnout. Obviously, it doesn't have Monstrous's Trample, but even so, I think it's still a reasonable comparison. Especially since being lower capacity, you can afford to put other units on the floor at the same time. Now, all that said, what this means is that kind of regardless of your start, Mystic Hammer is going to help you have a good first couple rings and help you transition into the mid game in a strong state. It allows you to be a little riskier with your banner choices. It allows you to be a little greedier with your shop choices. And that transitions to a decent position mid game and late game. It doesn't have the strongest power late game, but even so, still contributes pretty nicely. At rank 3, it's got 200 attack with the New Moon bonus. Plus, you still have access to Ardoon's innate Mage Blade. And so, even if that is not going to be the centerpiece of your deck, it is a strong level of attack backed up by a decent chunk of HP that helps you like get set up in the early turns of a battle. All in all, it's just a decent path. It will provide value all throughout the run. It also makes it a little easier to use other silent units since you can phase to New Moon at will. Or even if you want to set up a certain phase for your spells, it also helps you with that. Mind you, you do already have access to Moon Ritual with our Dune starter card, but there are turns where you're not going to be drawing that. And so having the additional redundancy of his ability is particularly nice. Next up, we've got Battleborn. This is the one where Ardoon gets permanent conduit on Slay. Also, upon ranking up, it goes from Mageblade 2 to Mageblade 4 to Mageblade 6. So it has much better scaling with the conduit as you rank him up. Now, where Mystic Hammer, I feel, tends to get underrated, I think Battleborn tends to get overrated. I personally would put it maybe C, maybe D. I think for right now, we're going to put it D. I might swap it later. But I think for the moment, we're going to put it D. Also, before I forget, just as an aside, I am only going to be sorting the champion paths into their respective tiers. I am not going to be moving them around in their individual tiers. Which is to say, I'm not ranking the paths in each tier, just sorting them into their respective classifications. I might change my mind on that later, but at least for the time being, I'm looking at a list of a whole lot of champion paths, and I'm pretty confident this video is already going to take a while to make. So, with that all out of the way. For Battleborn. So, the thing about Battleborn is that I think it's a path that is best described as being kind of at odds with itself. To get the slay bonuses, you need Ardoon to be getting the kills. But he, first off, has pretty weak HP. And so, in those early battles, you can't really have him as your frontliner unless you start with a good defensive tool to go along with it. Like, if you start with, like, Phase Blessing and can start converting your conduit into armor gen, fine, you can sort of use him as your frontliner that way. But in a lot of situations, he's going to be in the back, not really helping you take out, like, the heavies, and just, he's just going to be kind of awkward in those first couple battles. Later on, once you have built up a little bit of conduit with him, you also often are going to stop getting more conduit with him, or at least a meaningful amount of conduit, because the main payoff for the conduit is that it empowers your damage spells. And so then if you were using your damage spells to be killing all those enemies, then there's nothing for Ardoon to kill. Obviously, it's a little more nuanced than that. You don't necessarily have to be wiping the whole floor with spells, but, like, that is one of the things Luna does. And it feels generally bad to avoid doing that just so Ardoon can keep getting slays. The other kind of thing that is a problem for Battleborn is that Luna as a clan doesn't have great ways to capitalize upon him. Which is to say, Luna doesn't have access to ways to give him, like, multi-strike or sweep or trample to help him get additional slays, or to use his, like, high attack power after you've built up a bunch of conduit. Nor does it have a spell like Cleave that Banished has to convert a high attack power into a, like, full wave clear. Or even something like Minds of Their Own that Lazarus has to give him additional attacks. Of course, you can get those in specific clan combos, but there's a lot of situations where what Battleborn is going to do for you is going to give you a unit with one high hit of damage after investing pretty heavily into him. Or if you are generating conduit in other ways, again, you're probably using it to empower spells, which makes Ardoon not really that important to your strategy. Of course, you can make the argument that the conduit that he's building up is empowering other Mageblade units, but there's very few actual other Mageblade units. There's only two other Mageblade units, Selene Acolyte and Moonguard. And then there's the Moonblade, or Mageblade, excuse me, equipment. And, like, yeah, you can do that, but again, there are just better ways to be building up conduit, especially with, like, Ekka. But even without Ekka, there's a lot of ways in clan to be building up conduit that makes the conduit that Battleborn has kind of irrelevant. Also, if you are using something like Selene Acolyte as your main damage source, then it's probably getting the kills instead of Ardoon. Again, you can make the argument that it helps in Relentless, but there are better champion paths for Relentless, and also, frankly, I'm not that concerned about Relentless. Yes, it is something to keep in mind, and it is a meaningful problem, but I would say that Wave Clear is generally a much bigger consideration, and Battleborn is not that great for it. Also, if you care about Relentless, like both Hierophant and Mystic Hammer also are pretty solid for Relentless, and I would even say are probably better for Relentless in most situations. Anyways, all that said, we might bump it up to C later, but for now, let's leave it in D tier. Next up, we've got Hierophant. This is the Incant Armor path. Additionally, gives damage on Incant to other silent units. I think we're going to put this in B tier, at least for now. I maybe could see it being an A, but I think there's just a couple things that hold it back. Yes. All that said, so here's my thoughts on Hierophant. It's pretty solid, whether you are pairing it with silent units or not. Like, even just getting the Incant Armor on a whole floor is pretty good. Luna has a lot of ways to be playing out a lot of spells, especially if you are pairing with, like, Lunar Priestess, which is generating additional moon rituals for you each turn. But even without something like that, it's pretty normal to be playing out a lot of spells. And so getting floor-wide defensive scaling is real good. It helps protect you against, like, sweep enemies, which can be a problem for a number of Luna's more, like, frail units. Can help protect you from, like, Corruption, from Dominion Seraph, or from, like, Corruption Fleshweaver, yada, yada, yada. It's just pretty solid. It also is, helping you with Relentless by helping scale up your defenses across the fight. Ideally, you are also getting the offensive scaling by pairing it with silent units. The problem with that is that there's not actually that many silent units. There's only 4 of them total, and 1 of them is a rare unit. And that rare unit, Moonguard, already has Mageblade, and so you're probably focused on scaling it through the Mageblade already, which makes the attack bonus from Hierophant not irrelevant, but certainly a lot less notable. So, with the non-rare banner units, you've got only 3. One of which is Nightingale, which has multi-strike in New Moon. So that is, I would say, the ideal unit pair for Hierophant. The armor helps get around kind of the squishiness of Nightingale, and the attack scaling is really relevant on a unit that has 3 attacks at base. The other 2 are okay with Hierophant. Shade Guard is a good unit in general, but its higher capacity makes it harder to get multiple of them on a floor with Ardoon, making it harder to really benefit from the floor-wide scaling. And then Silent Sentinel, I think that's the name of it. Its ability to heal itself is kind of at odds with stacking armor on it, and also it has pretty low offensive stats to begin with, making it hard to use it as an offensive unit. You still can, but it's not amazing. Anyways, all this to say that if there were more silent units, or if it weren't locked to silent units but affected, like, all Luna units, or just, like, all non-Selene units or something, it would be easily higher. Because being able to scale both offense and defense at the same time, it's very good. It's just that Hierophant's specific ability to do that is fairly limited. So, next up, we got Ballet. Ballet's kind of a weird one. Ballet is, I think, a really fun champion and has some very good moments, but on the whole is kind of a middling champion. First off, we got Headsman. This is the one that gives him trample, and then on Slay propagates all allied units. So, This is another one where I think it belongs in probably D tier. I could, again, maybe see it going to C. Maybe we'll change our mind later. But this path has a number of problems. First off, similar to Battleborn, it actually has fairly bad stats. It does have much better base attack at rank 3, where it starts with 160 attack, but when you are faced up against, like, especially if you're going up against, like, Savagery, where you're facing double heavies who have 500 HP each, and potentially there's also amalgams after that who have, like, 300 HP each, having 160 attack is not going to do nearly enough for your trample to matter. Yes, there are a number of waves where there are going to be some, like, low health chump blockers in the way, but even so, the point being is it is hard to get meaningful levels of slays with Headsman. Also, its low HP makes it harder to put it, like, at the front of your floor. It's not as much an issue with Under Legion because you've got the ability to spawn fungi who can be chump blockers for you, but even so, it is still a meaningful consideration. Beyond that, kind of the big issue with Headsman is that it's very dependent on your clan combo, because Under Legion itself has very few things on allies to propagate. Specifically, it has very limited access to regen, and that's it. So, while you can get access to, like, damage shields, or reanimate, or rage, depending on your clan combo, sometimes you're going to be in a clan combo that doesn't have those things. In which case, there's not really much meaningful stuff for you to be propagating, even if you are getting the slays with Bullet. Additionally, Under Legion itself has basically no damage scaling for Bullet. Again, depending on clan combo, maybe you'll pair with, like, Hellhorn, and you'll be able to give him a bunch of rage. And especially then, if you are giving him rage, he can propagate the rage if he slays things, and it can be kind of a self-perpetuating cycle. Or if you are, like, paired with Lazarus, you can give him spikes and reanimate, and he can kill backliners when they attack and then propagate his spikes and his reanimate at the same time. Like, there are some things you can do with Headsman, but again, it's very dependent on clan combo. Also, again, similar to Luna, Under Legion doesn't have any innate way to give him, like, multi-strike, or to give him or to, like, scale off of his damage, even if you do manage to get it high. The trample is good, but on the whole, like, kind of the best thing about Headsman is using it as a cross path, specifically for Hiveminder, which we'll talk about in a bit. But anyways, it's an okay path. It has some, like, high rolls, but on the whole, it's not great. Next up, we got Executioner. This is the one that got reworked to spawn fungi on Siphon, which is to say whenever enemies die on that floor. Additionally, it gives a bonus HP to fungi, starting at plus 1 HP and going to plus 3 HP per stack, which makes the fungi dramatically tankier, and it takes more damage for them to start losing any stacks. Now, I would say this is probably an A rank path. It is just really good for a number of reasons. First off, making fungi themselves is kind of both offense and defense. It's not as strong offense and defense as some other paths are going to be capable of, but it's basically giving you an additional unit that can very easily do some pretty strong damage on your floor, while also giving you replenishable, like, chump blockers. More than that, though, and the true strength of the path is that it is an easy way to bring online or even kind of supercharge a lot of the things that Under Legion already wants to be doing. Namely, if you're pairing this with something like Spore Launcher, being able to kill off backliners and then have that spawn on their death to then rally the Spore Launcher more, to then be putting even more decay on anything that would have survived. Like, anyways, it works really well. You can also use it with like Squad Leader and turn the fungi stack themselves into a powerhouse. You can also do things totally separate from Under Legion and just use the fungi stack as, an ever-increasing free wall of defense and a bit of offense. Like, anyways, it's just a good path, and it's pretty versatile. Doesn't take a whole lot of investment. Does take some investment, because you do still need to be killing some enemies on the floor, but that's not too difficult to do. Anyways, on the whole, I'd say A tier, maybe B tier, but it's just pretty good. Now, for Hiveminder, I think that's our first true C tier path. This being the path that gets permanent attack and HP on Rally. Now, again, the problem with this is really just that Under Legion has a harder time capitalizing upon this path. It requires a fair bit of investment, because again, like, the base stats are like nothing, but that doesn't really matter because you're essentially never using the base stats. It's not that difficult to rally a ton. And as opposed to some other paths that you're going to have to put heavy investment in, I would say that this one is not as much of an issue to be investing heavily in. Which is to say, like, Under Legion, a lot of their gameplay already wants to be generating fungi. And even if you are not using other rally units, like, again, similar to Executioner, just making a giant wall of fungi is basically never a bad thing. It is not a hefty penalty for you to be, like, building into his rally. Again, the problem is just he's a 3 capacity unit that requires investment, and then there's no in-clan way to, like, give a multi-strike or to have something like Cleave or like Shield of Wing in Banished, which would turn his high health into Wave Clear. Like, Under Legion doesn't have those tools, except that you can potentially cross path into Headsman and get Trample. The problem with that is that it's unreliable, because if you start with Hiveminder, you might just never be offered Headsman later in the run. Or if you are offered Headsman at the second upgrade, then you have to make a decision between locking in Headsman now for the Trample, but then locking yourself out of getting the HP scaling that Hiveminder rank 2 brings, and having to wait until the third upgrade to start building up his HP. Or you go to rank 2 on Hiveminder and hope that you see Headsman later, or whatever. Like, it's not the end of the world if you whiff on the Trample, but having Bolette just be this giant unit that can kill like 1 heavy and has a bunch of HP, it's not incredibly helpful. There are ways to make it work. Like, again, if you're pairing it with like Spore Launchers and you are doing enough rallying that is killing off all the waves. But in that situation, it's really the Spore Launchers that are like the star of the show, and Bolette is generally pretty redundant. Like, yes, he wins Relentless, but it's not that important. Like, if you are doing that much rallying consistently with like your Spore Launchers, you're probably just winning Relentless with them anyways. So, all in all, it's a path that, like, is really fun to play, and it can do some solid work. but it's pretty heavily dependent on clan combo and on the specific situation that you end up in. But it's not ever going to be like truly bad for you, but there's a lot of situations where it's not going to be really doing an insane amount for you. Moving on. Next up, we got the first of the DLC champions with Echo Right. Echo Right is... God, what do I even want to say about Echo Right? I'd say Echo Right's maybe a little less good than Monster Train 1. I don't even know if I would say that, though. Echo Right's just a pretty solid champion. Not like S tier, but across the board, pretty solid. Starting with Shellsmith. Shellsmith definitely the weakest of Echo Right's pathways. This is the one that applies armor to the whole floor with an etch trigger. So every time you're consuming a card, you'll be applying armor to the whole floor. I would say this is probably a C tier path. Maybe B. I think C is probably fairer for it right now. It's not truly a bad path so much as generally it's just there's better things you can be doing. Like particularly the opportunity cost of taking Shellsmith over Marshallord or Repeater is like it's basically just always better to take one of the other two. But it's a path that's still going to do good work for you when you build into it. With the changes to Monster Train 2, there is a pretty high base attack on Shellsmith. Like at rank 1, it's 40, which is not bad. Doubles to 80 at rank 2, and then doubles again to 160 at rank 3. Having a 2 capacity, 160 attack power unit that can also armor up your whole floor is not bad. Again, that's not game winning on its own, and that's kind of the problem with Shellsmith. It's just that while it can provide an insane amount of armor and can do so pretty easily with Wurmkin's tools, with the high health of enemies in Monster Train 2, I care generally a lot more about having strong offense than kind of like needlessly high defense. Anyways, kind of rambling aside, it's a good path. It's just largely there's better things you can be doing. But it's not hard to build into, and it's pretty good at its job. Like, late in a fight, you will end up with hundreds of extra armor on all your units. And, again, because it's floor-wide, the more units you have on the floor, the better value you're getting out of the bonus. Anyways, on to the next one, we have Marshallord. Marshallord is A tier for sure. This being the path that creates an egg, and then on edge, removes shell from eggs on the floor, and then additionally in Monster Train 2, also applies bonus attack to eggs on edge. I'm sorry, not just eggs, applies a bonus attack to all friendly units. Marshallord, God, what do we even say about Marshallord? Essentially, here's the deal. It's giving you... Marshallord doesn't have bad stats. It's giving you a free extra unit on the floor that has also pretty solid stats. Is making it easier to play around egg units, which are already strong units, and is giving you some level of damage scaling for all of your units. It is a potent combination. It's not hard to build around, and it's just very solid. I will say kind of the one bad thing I can say about Marshallord is that I think Bog Deep Cocoon, the rank 3 egg, the large one, probably needs an adjustment in its stats in Monster Train 2. Probably needs either a little higher base stats or needs higher scaling once you've hatched the egg. It's still good, and having trample is pretty fabulous. It's just that, again, with the high health of enemies in Monster Train 2, it is harder to make that trample be your wave clear solution, since it doesn't naturally scale its stats as quick as you might like. But anyways, all that said, it's just a lot of really good stuff altogether. It's pretty hard to fault Martial Lords in really any way. Next up, we've got Repeater, which I think also belongs in A tier. This is the one that returns a random consumed card back to your hand. Or at rank 3, it returns 2 consumed cards. Now, this again is a little dependent on clan combo, but not that dependent on clan combo. Basically, every clan is going to have some level of powerful consume cards, and being able to just bring back 1 or 2 consume cards every turn and just keep getting value out of them is great. It means that you never have to search for remove consume. It means that you're basically getting an extra card or 2 in your hand every turn. It allows you to be more aggressive with your upgrades on those cards, like on, for instance, Spike of the League, the one that gives Reanimate. Rather than having to get remove consume, you can put like double stack on it, and like intrinsic, so you start with it. And anyways, it's just very... There's a lot of great ways to use Repeater. Not to mention that there's also, helps you trigger edges more reliably. Mind you, there's not many edge triggers in the game, especially since they got rid of one of the ones in Wurmkin itself in the transition to Monster Train 2. But even so, it is worth noting that it helps with etching. All in all, it's a versatile, powerful champion path. Additionally, just like Shellsmith, has very high attack power. It doesn't have great defense, but there's a lot of ways around that, both with Wurmkin tools and, with others. So, not too big a concern. Now, for Eka. I know a lot of people consider Eka to be like one of the weakest champions in the game. I think that mentality has kind of shifted as the game has aged. I don't hear people saying that nearly as often, but I do still hear people saying it. And I think that mostly has to do with learning curve. Again, I don't think she's like an S tier champion, but I think she's pretty solid. That said, I'm a little uncertain where I want to put her paths. For the first one, Celestial Spellweaver, this being the Incant Gain Conduit path. I think it's either going to be B or A. I lean towards A at the moment. Might drop it down from that later. It has a bit of a rough early game depending on your start, since you can start with some fairly frail units. She herself has pretty bad stats, and so can have a rough early game. And if you don't have any good spells to empower with the conduit, it can be a little rough. Even then, just empowering your Witch Weaves can still do good work, but it's a little rough early. But it's not that hard to recover from that, and going into mid-game and especially late game, it's a powerhouse. There's a lot of great spells in Luna that can benefit from it, plus a ton of great spells in other clans that can benefit from all that conduit. Additionally, if you have one of the Mageblade units, or if you are using the Mageblade equipment, that is a relentless solution on its own. Also in clan, you've got access to Phase Blessing or Tidal Turning, which is an incredible defensive tool with how much conduit she builds up and how quickly she builds it. All in all, Celestial Spellweaver can turn even sort of underwhelming spells into like wave clear or boss killing solutions. It's not that hard to build around, and it has great payoff. So for the time being, we'll put it in A tier. Silver Empress. This is her full moon path. She gains conduit on full moon, and then additionally gets the activated ability where she creates an ephemeral copy of a random spell played last turn. This one, I think, is the hardest one for me to rate of her paths because it's not bad, but I personally don't love playing it, and I think it's a bit fiddly. Not just because you need phase control to reliably get the bonus, but because the activated ability is rather unreliable in a frustrating way. Because, like, especially if I am trying to get phase control so I can reliably use her conduit, I'm mostly getting phase control by spells. And that means that then those spells are in the pool for her to pull with her ability. And so half the time you use the ability, you're going to get like a moon ritual, which, like, maybe you want a moon ritual, but I'm not that excited to get a moon ritual instead of like copying like my why am I blanking on the name of it? I keep wanting to say Celestial Cascade, and that's not the right name at all. Anyways, the point is, you could get a spell you care about, or you could get like a moon ritual. And that is a frustrating experience. Celestial Storm, that's the word I was looking for. But anyways, like, I just find her ability rather unreliable. And while she can give off an insane amount of conduit right off the bat, I don't love having to play around phase control to get good value out of it. All that said, I still think it probably warrants like C tier. It's still a pretty decent path, and it's really not that hard to build around the phase control. It's just that I basically would rather always play her other two paths. If I want Conduit, Celestial Spellweaver, it's going to have like a little bit of a slower start, but it's going to, be pretty great at it without having some of the fiddliness. And if I want to build into phase control, Lunar Steward is going to do a much better job of that. Speaking of Lunar Steward, I think this deserves B tier. I know a lot of people disdain Lunar Steward because they act like it is incredibly difficult to build around since Ekka has no innate phase control. I disagree. There's a fair bit of phase potential in Luna, and the payoff for it is strong. Because this is the path that on Moon Cycle gives both attack and HP to all friendly units on the floor. At rank 1, it's +1/+1. At rank 3, it's +3/+3. So, even if you only see like a Lunar Priestess, that alone is like a game-winning condition. Obviously, you're not always going to see Lunar Priestess, but there's a lot of good units you can pair this with. There's a lot of ways in Clan that you can get phase control. Even if you somehow whiff and don't get phase control, it still is +3/+3 to all units every turn. It's not incredible, but it's not bad. Anyways, I like Lunar Steward a lot. Anything that scales both offense and defense is pretty valuable. And the fact that it's max HP rather than like armor is especially nice, since you're in Clan with some spells that can heal. It also means that if you slap Endless on something, when you replay it, it will come back out at your full max HP. It's just, it's a pretty good path, I would say. Next up, we got Fade. Fade, what to say about Fade? She definitely took a little bit of a hit going to Monster Train 2 over Monster Train 1, where she was definitely far and away one of the best champions in the game. I would say she's still pretty great. Not as insane as Monster Train 1, but still very strong. For her first path, Firelight, this being the on extinguish, give friendly units attack, HP, and burnout, that for me has got to be an A tier path. Again, the fact that it is doing offensive and defensive and burnout scaling all in one is really good. It's not a lot of defensive scaling. Like, that's not the main reason you're using it, but it's still good. The main thing is that it's a lot of offensive scaling, and it giving burnout rather than being a downside means that it allows you to use burnout tools in the clan much more easily. For instance, pairing it with like Lady of the House, which gets extra attack per stack of burnout, or Paraffin Enforcer, which gives rage on strike when to all burnout units, or even just if you are reforming a unit, being able to extend its burnout with Fade so that you can go into Relentless in better shape. Like, all of that is really powerful and valuable. Also, because you have access to primitive molds as her starting card, you're never really in a situation, outside of using Pyre of Dominion, you're basically never in a situation where you don't already have the tools to use Firelight. Obviously, you can be a little fiddly in like Ring 1, where sometimes you might draw the primitive bolts on the wrong turn. Even so, I don't think that's enough of an issue to really mark against Firelight Fade. And again, like going to mid-game, late game, it is very powerful. It's a lot of offensive scaling, and it gives it to the whole floor, which is great. Eternal Flame is another of those paths that I think gets pretty heavily overrated. It is still quite good, but I would put it at C. Here's the thing about Eternal Flame. Yes, it is fairly self-contained, and it can reach pretty high levels of attack. The problem is that getting to high levels of attack is not doing all that much for you. For a couple reasons. First off, there's a lot of waves in Monster Train 2 that have like chump blockers at the front of the floor, like the 3 HP enemies that apply corruption to the front unit on death, or like a purified soul, whatever. And so with Fade having quick, she will always attack first, unless you have other units with quick, obviously. But so in a lot of situations, she'll end up, like, even if she has 400 attack power, she'll end up just killing, like, a 3 HP unit. Obviously, there are ways to play around this. Like, you can use spells to kill off enemies. You can put her on a higher floor and have something on a lower floor kill those first. Yada, yada, yada. There are ways around this. But even so, it is a meaningful problem for her. Even beyond all of that, you still have to get to, like, a really high level of attack for her to be, like, breaking through heavies. She can do it, but it takes multiple turns. And unlike something like Firelight, where you can like kill her and reform her and kill her again, like multiple times in a turn, you can't really do that with Eternal Flame because she never goes to the reform pool because she has Endless, and there's very few ways to draw mid-turn in Monster Train. So you're pretty much at the mercy of just scaling her once per turn, which means she's not contributing all that much on the early turns of battle. Yes, she helps you win Relentless, but again, like, scaling is the name of the game in Monster Train, so by the end of the battle, when you were dealing with Relentless, you generally have enough scaling that that's not too much of a problem anyways. Like, it's just not that important. Anyways, it's an okay path, but I don't think the payoff is quite worth the investment a lot of the time. Also, another meaningful consideration for it, if you are, getting her killed every turn, that is also taking up a draw every turn, because you are drawing Fade as your first card every turn. It's not the end of the world, but, like, it does help prevent you from doing other things. Doesn't pair super well if you want to be doing, like, incant strategies, or if you're digging for a specific card. Like, it's not the end of the world. Endless is still quite good, but it is a consideration. Now, Little Icarus. This being the Slay, Gain Attack, and Spikes permanently path. This is definitely the one that took the biggest hit from Monster Train 1 to 2. Where in Monster Train 1, it was one of the very few pathways in the game that could essentially solo. Obviously, you could pair it with banner units, but it was one of the paths that reliably and pretty easily could be run without banner units at all. Can't really do that in Monster Train 2, kind of. Namely, it's for a couple of reasons. The biggest one is the existence of reanimate enemies who will survive attacking into Fade Spikes kind of no matter what. So you need something else to ensure that you are getting enough wave clear to finish them off. There's lots of ways to do that. Also, deployment phase makes putting down extra banner units with Little Icarus much less of a concern anyways. Anyways, all this rambling to say that post buffs, I think Little Icarus is in a pretty solid state. I would personally put it at like A, I think. Maybe B. I might be overvaluing it, but I think it still probably deserves A rank. It is not that hard to start building up spikes on her, and even with the high health of later enemies, you can get her pretty consistently to a point where she is killing most or all of a wave on her own. The only consideration you need for her is defense, but there's a lot of ways to do that. Again, a little dependent on clan combo, because Remnant themselves don't have a ton of ways to support that. But a lot of other clans do. Like, Banished is great at supporting her, Hellhorn is pretty good at supporting her, Wurmkin is good at supporting her, Umbra is good at supporting her. Like, there's a lot of situations where you can pretty easily build up a monumental level of defense on her, and then she will convert that defense into offense, essentially. Again, needs more support than Monster Train 1, but that doesn't matter too much. And it is also totally fair, because she was definitely way too strong in Monster Train 1. Next up, we've got Fel. Fel is a very strong champion. And another one where, all three of her paths are good. Just kind of undeniably, they're strong. Starting off, we've got Vanguardian. This is the Revenge, Apply Valor to all friendly units path. This is another one that I think people underrate pretty regularly, because they focus too much on... I think people expect too much for it to be self-sufficient. This is true of a lot of things in Monster Train, particularly champion paths, where people act like if something needs investment, it's not worth using. Because, Vanguardian does need some defensive help, particularly going into flying bosses. because of the way that flying bosses spawn, and because you need Vanguardian to be in the front to really get the most value out of it, it can be awkward for her on the first like turn or two as you start getting scaled up. But again, you're in a clan that has some great defensive tools. Like, you've got access to damage shields, you've got access to Valor, and a lot of ways to apply Valor, even beyond her innate ability. And in exchange, what you get out of Vanguardian is you get strong offensive scaling, because it applies to the entire floor, and you're in the clan that is best at overstacking floors. And so the more units you have on the floor, the more offensive scaling you're getting out of it. And you're also getting defensive scaling, since she is buffing her own Valor, and so can pretty easily get to a point where she is breaking even on incoming damage, and then is taking no damage for the rest of the fight, essentially, because she has more Valor than the damage she's taking each turn. It is another path that essentially lets you convert defensive scaling into offensive scaling, meaning that you are solving two problems with only one investment. And I think people really undervalue that. I personally would put Vanguardian, I think A, maybe B, but I think the payoff for Vanguardian is very good. Like, again, I certainly acknowledge that it does require some investment, because you really do want to be setting up something like intrinsic divinity, or intrinsic, like, a source of damage shields, or things like that. But, like, that's easy to do, and it's not a big ask. And again, the payoff is certainly worth it. Now, Unchained is the next one. This being her perma-valor gain path. Shift gain Valor permanently, and then at later ranks, at rank 3, if you have 75 or more Valor, she gains additional multi-strike. Fel already having base multi-strike, which is incredible. Yeah, anyways, what to say about Unchained? I think Unchained is our first S-tier path. It is a path that certainly requires a lot of investment, because it's very bad if you are not shifting her constantly. But why would you not just always be shifting her? Like, the payoff is very strong, and you already have access to shift with her starting card, again, unless you have, like, Pyre of Dominion. It is not very difficult to play around her. There's a number of units in clan that also want to be shifting and have strong payoff for shifting a bunch. And going into late game, you get a unit that has high offense, high defense, and 3 attacks. And compared to, like, the perma-scaling Bullet path, again, naturally having 2 or essentially 3 attacks is already a much better payoff for, like, the perma-scaling attack. Like, yeah, she's not going to get to the, like, 1,000 attack that Bullet is going to have, but getting to 300 to 400 attack with 3 attacks is generally much better, since you can be killing potentially 3 different units with that. Plus, also scales with, like, strike triggers, namely, Everlasting Light, which gives Valor to the whole floor on strike. Additionally, again, Banished as a clan has better ways to capitalize upon a unit like Fel. You've got in clan, again, you've got Everlasting Light, which gives a strike trigger to power up the whole floor. You've got Cleave, which can convert her high offense into wave clear. You've got Shield of Wing to allow her to tank and kill enemies. She doesn't have the highest HP, but it's still enough to kill off kind of the low health enemies on her unkillable Wall of Valor. You've got the bird that gives trample to the whole floor, so you can do that. You can also give her extra multi-strike with Cursed Twin Blade. And the fact that you're losing attack on strike basically doesn't matter when she's got an insane amount of attack. Like, it's just a very good path. It's not very hard to build into, and the payoff is huge. Mind you, does have some caveats, like, again, similar to Vanguardian, you do need like a turn for her to get set up, which can be a little awkward since you need to wait for the Valor to kick in. But again, there's lots of ways to do that. Whether you need to like set up a chump blocker or like move the boss to another floor or set up damage shields, whatever. There's lots of ways to make it work. It's not that big an ask. Anyways, all that rambling brings us to Savior. Now, the problem with Savior is basically just it's not the other two. Which is to say, Savior is a good path that gets overshadowed. Mind you, I know there are a lot of people who really like playing Savior and kind of default to using it. And there's nothing really wrong with that. It's a strong path. I should clarify. Savior is the path that gives her an activated ability. Specifically, it advances her to the front, it gives her some Valor, and at rank 3... It gives her armor equal to her Valor count, which also means that if you already have her Valor armor, then you can essentially double her Valor armor. And at rank 3, instead of just giving that armor to herself, she gives it to the whole floor. Now, again, that's just pretty good. She doesn't have the built-in scaling that Vanguardian and Unchained do, so you do need to find ways to be giving her Valor. Like, yes, her ability gives her a little bit of Valor, but it's not a lot. You do need to be pairing her with something else to, like, really make it meaningful. But again, that's not hard to do. The main really like key thing about Savior is that rank 3 bonus. Being able to armor up your whole floor is a very nice get out of jail free card. It helps protect you against the sweep enemies in the savagery fight. It helps you be protected against Dominion's corruption. It's also a on-demand shift if you need it. Also being able to armor up backliners means that if you are using... It allows you to seed your backline units with some armor so that you can rotate them up front to get their Valor armor later in the fight more easily if you want to, since that can usually be a helpful strategy. So you're spreading around who's getting the Valor armor each turn rather than only letting one unit get it repeatedly. Anyways, it's a good path. It's just that oftentimes that's not necessary. Because, again, you've got a lot of great defensive tools in clan. You've also got whatever your allied clan's defensive tools are. You'll also have ways to be like wiping the enemies before they have a chance to attack. And if they don't have something like sweep or like AoE corruption, then it doesn't super matter often if you are armoring up your backliners because you are building up so much Valor on Unchained or Vanguardian or whatever that they're not hurting you anyways. They're not getting through Fel. So, like, Savior, I think I put as B, maybe deserves A, but I have a hard time putting it there when I feel it gets overshadowed by the other two paths. Alright, all that said, next up, we have Phoenix. Also, at some point, I should probably pick up the pace because we still have so many champions to get through. But anyways, for Phoenix. Phoenix is... he's a champion I like playing, kind of. I will say I think he's on the weaker end. Still decent to use, but on the weaker end. All that said, for his first path, Overlord, this being the one that gains on Slay, permanently gains attack, And then at rank 2 and again at rank 3 upgrades his innate ability. At rank 2, it makes it explosive, so the excess damage spills over to all other enemies. In rank 3, it is explosive and deals 2 times his attack damage instead of only 1 times his attack damage. I hear people often complain that the damage scaling is too slow on Overlord, and I think that kind of misses the point of the path. Like, yes, the damage scaling is kind of slow, but you're taking Overlord for the upgrade to the ability, not for the damage scaling. Like, the damage scaling is nice, and will be pertinent later as you are, killing off multiple units repeatedly with his ability. But again, the real drive of this path is the ability to turn Phoenix into a win condition. Since with enough attack power and with access to cooldown reduction, of which there's multiple ways to get cooldown reduction in Pyreborn, with enough attack power, you will be easily wiping every wave. Even if you aren't getting cooldown reduction, and if you're not focusing on Phoenix, you can still use him to wipe a wave every couple turns, which is not incredible, but not bad. All in all, I think it's a fun path to build around, but it is a little unreliable, and Phoenix himself has kind of bad stats. Particularly his just kind of low defense. If the ability were innate cooldown 2, like Hothead, instead of cooldown 3, it would certainly be a lot stronger, but I think that would also be maybe unfair. Anyways, all this to say, I think it probably deserves a C tier. Golden Crown is another of those paths that I think people overrate, because I think just in general with Pyreborn, people overly fixate upon horde generation. Because essentially what you're doing with Golden Crown is you're giving up Phoenix's ability to be a meaningful source of damage in exchange for getting a bit of horde and later on a bit of gold. And that can be good. Don't get me wrong. I do like horde. I think it's a strong mechanic. But I would still generally rather take Pyromaniac, since that actually helps meaningfully with the problems you need to be solving. If you want to build into horde, there's a lot of ways to build into horde. And even if you are not building into horde, that's fine. There's a lot of ways to build Pyreborn in a meaningful winning capacity without touching horde at all. All this to say, I think Golden Crown, I don't know, I kind of want to put it in C tier as well, but I do think it's probably on the whole better than Overlord, and that makes me kind of want to bump Overlord down to D tier. I don't think Overlord necessarily deserves that. Let's do it. I do think Overlord, looking at the other things in C that I've got right here, is not on the same level. So that's probably fine to bump it down to D. Anyways, Golden Crown's fine. Horde is good. That's the whole point of it, is that you are turning Phoenix into being kind of an underwhelming unit so that you can help with horde. Depending on how the rest of your horde generation goes and cooldown reduction, that might be great for you, or it might be just kind of underwhelming and he gets you a bit of horde every fight. All in all, it's a fine path. I don't think it's incredible, but it's fine. As for Pyromaniac, this being the one that increases how much Pyrogel is applied to units on the floor. So at rank 1, it's +1 whenever you're applying Pyrogel. Rank 2 is +2. Rank 3, it's +4 every time you're applying Pyrogel. This, I would say, is Phoenix's best path. I know a lot of people, again, fixate on Golden Crown. I definitely think Pyromaniac is certainly better. It does much more of what you actually want your champion to be doing. It also just has better stats. Not insane stats, but it helps. Even if you're not building heavily into Pyre Gel, just getting like some small sources of Pyre Gel goes a long way. Like even just using his starter card, the Fire Starters, it takes it from being Pyre Gel 2 to Pyre Gel 6, meaning that every single source of damage you have after that point is doing 6 more damage, which is pretty good. It's a little fiddly because obviously, like, you know, it's less efficient than like scaling up your whole floor's actual attack values, because that will carry over wave to wave to wave more easily rather than having to reapply Pyre Gel to every unit. But even so, there's a lot of good ways to make use of Pyromaniac, especially pairing it with something like Magma Cultist, which applies 1 Pyre Gel on Incant to all enemies. So making that go from 1 Pyre Gel to 5 Pyre Gel per spell is huge. But even if you're just like pairing him with like Flaming Talons, the minor Pyreborn artifact that applies Pyre Gel when they ascend, like that takes it from Pyre Gel 2 to Pyre Gel 6 to all enemies just for Phoenix existing on one of the floors they pass through, which is not bad. It's pretty decent. Again, it's not like insane. There are ways to get like insane payoff with Pyromaniac, particularly pairing with Magma Cultist and Cursed Dragon Staff is kind of the classic one. But anyways, I don't think I can rate it like super high. Kind of want to put in B. I think C is probably more reasonable. I can't be putting like everything in B tier after all. And C feels about right. I do think it's better than Golden Crown, but I don't think it's like an insane path. Again, the high roll is great, but like if you're not building around it, it's okay. But it's pretty decent. There's a lot of ways to apply Pyre Gel. Anyways, on to Gilda. I don't know where I want to begin with Gilda. I mean, obviously we're going to go into order, but that is to say, I think Gilda is, again, one of those kind of middle-of-the-pack champions. She's just kind of solid. She's not one of my favorite to play, but she, similar to Ardoon, just kind of always provides some amount of like solid value. Starting with Guild Mother, this being her trample and summon a gilded egg path. I will say the trample is largely irrelevant on this path. It is generally not why you are taking this path. And like, yeah, you can play around the trample, but that's not the main point. The main point is just that she's guaranteed giving you a good chunk of Horde. Because as long as the egg survives, you gain Horde at the end of combat. Also at rank 3, in addition to gaining the Horde, she also gives you 400 gold. You only get to use that for effectively one battle, since you get it after the second flying boss. You go into ring 7. You get the Celebrate bonus. You can spend it before fighting Seraph. And like technically you can trigger it again after Seraph, but you've nowhere to spend the gold. So it's primarily only giving you the 400 once. All that rambling aside, it's a fine path. Again, I think people kind of overrate it just because it gives Horde. It does give a lot of Horde, though. And she herself has decent stats. Not as good early game stats as like Mystic Hammer or Hard Dune, especially since she also increases to 4 capacity, which means that's harder to fit her on a floor. Mind you, there are a couple 1 capacity banners in Pyreborn, so you can still put those down before you summon her and pair her with something on the same floor, which is nice. But anyways, her stats for being as large as she is, at least early game, aren't great. But again, that's not the main purpose. all stalling aside, I don't know. I think probably C is warranted. It's C or B for sure. It's certainly not an A path. It's certainly not a D path. Part of what gives me pause is, as far as like a horde generation path, I think it is notably better than Golden Crown. Obviously, there are ways to get like really good value out of Golden Crown, like if you are getting cooldown reduction, or if you're doing something tricksy like swapping his ability with the Under Legion Tome of Evergrowth, which has a 1 cooldown, so you can use it every turn. But on average, as far as horde generation goes, Guild is going to do a better job for you. She has decent stats, and she's just kind of fire and forget. You put her down, and you let the rest of your team do their own thing, and she's not like taking up a meaningful capacity. Like, she's taking up capacity, but she's doing it on her own floor. You don't really need to protect her all that much. So I do kind of feel like it should be separated from Golden Crown, but I'm not sure I feel as good about it as the other B tier things. We might come back to that. Anyways, final thoughts on it is essentially just that, like, Horde is good. She herself is fairly underwhelming, but she's carried by the strength of Horde just being a valuable, powerful mechanic. As far as Bloat Matron, her next path, this being the Harvest, apply Pyre Gel to enemy units, and Whelp units cost -1 on this floor. I think this is her strongest path. It is deceptively good. Even if you are not using Whelps with it, which oftentimes I don't, but you can. Partly it pairs very well with her basic Whelps, the ones that explode themselves with their activated ability. Like, just putting Endless on one of those, or 2 of those, and playing them every turn, exploding them, applying 6 Pyre Gel to all enemies, and then if you use a second one, if you kill off any backliners, you're applying even more Pyre Gel to all enemies, and you've taken out the backliners. Anyways, I'm rambling, but the point is, like, it's not that hard to bring Bloat Matron online. There's a lot of ways to be killing off the backliners. It helps you then kill any remaining enemies. It's just pretty strong damage scaling so long as you are doing the minimum of work to kill enemies. Or, again, you can pair it with, like, killing your own units. You can kill Whelps, you can kill Tombs, you can kill Imps, you can kill, like, a Meddler from Luna, whatever. Anyways, I'm rambling, but the point is, it gives a lot of passive damage scaling. And I think it's deceptively strong how much damage scaling it gives. Also, has pretty solid stats. Like at rank 1, 10 attack, which isn't great, but it's not terrible. 45 HP is pretty decent as far as like rank 1 champion stats go. Later on at rank 3, it's 20 attack, 100 HP. Again, pretty terrible attack, but 100 HP is pretty solid. Anyways, I think Bloat Matron definitely deserves B. Maybe even A. I think probably B for now. If we did move Guild Mother up, I maybe would move up Bloat Matron, but again, looking at like what else is in A, I don't think I can justify that. Lady Avarice. This being her enchant, give Avarice to the floor, meaning she does not gain Avarice herself, only other units on the floor gain it. And then at rank 2 and 3, she then also starts getting damage scaling per 100 gold that you have. Now, this is a pretty good path. You're basically taking it just for the Avarice. The damage scaling is nice, but like, you're generally not getting that much power on her with it, because the point of the gold is to spend the gold. And so in between battles, you're generally going to be draining most or all of your gold. You could hold on to it, I guess, but it's very rarely the correct choice to do so, unless you're also using like Gold Tooth, but Gold Tooth is a rare unit. You're not going to see it all that often, and even then, you could just spend the gold and make yourself stronger and then just build up more gold in the coming fight with all of the avarice that you have. Anyways, the point being is the amount of avarice she gives is strong. It is a lot of extra gold, particularly because of the way that this works with her whelps, which is to say, the avarice works not just on attacks, but on any ability use as well. So, in like the first fight, every time you play one of her whelps down alongside her, you explode the whelp, it hits like 2-3 enemies, and that is 10 to 15 gold for every whelp in your deck. Later on, you can also pair it with like Hothead or something, or a sweep unit, whatever. You are getting a lot of extra gold, which allows you to make your deck so much stronger. It allows you to be very greedy with rerolls and to like hunt down upgrades that you want. It allows you to just take flat out more upgrades so that you can put even like HP on a shield steward or a large stone, whatever just helps you get through whatever stage of the game you're at, or to prepare for some problem you care about later. Lets you take more artifacts, even if you're not building into Horde at all. It doesn't matter if you can just hard buy them. Lets you remove more cards from your deck and refine it down as thin as you want. Anyways, like, I may be overstating the amount of avarice you generate a little bit, but like, it's a lot of extra gold. And more to the point, it gives you gold early on, which is when you are generally most hungry for gold. It very much makes it easy to, like, without avarice, even taking the trials, going into the first shop or two, it's pretty common that you won't be able to afford, well, at the very least, everything you care about. But, like, you might not be able to afford one of the large upgrades after re-rolling, meaning that you're much more limited in your options. Having that burst of extra gold makes a big difference. Anyways, all this to say, this is another one that I think has to be in B, maybe A tier. I think B is probably correct, though. Also, I've been doing so much talking, and I can definitely feel it in my throat. Like, I do a lot of talking normally, but the non-stop talking is something. Okay, on to Grail. So, Grail, his first path, Living Armory. This being the one where whenever he's equipped, he applies extra damage to all friendly units on the floor, himself included. Living Armory is incredible. It is very much an S tier path. At the very least an A tier path, but again, compared to what is in A tier, I think it has to go in S tier. The amount of damage scaling it gives is huge. Like at rank 3, it is 24 attack to all friendly units per equipment, and like it's not a hard condition to meet. You start with multiple graft units as his starter card, which already brings his ability online. Plus, you can just go to a Merchant of Arms and just pick up really, like, any equipment. And, like, every one of them is worth a good chunk of power. Again, the fact that it is scaling the entire floor cannot be overstated how good that is. Especially since in Clan, you've got access to several units that can make great use of that. Like Plague Doctor, which effectively doubles its own damage output by applying unstable equal to the damage dealt. Or Test Subject Alpha, which has sweep and quick by base. It has terrible stats, and so like the only thing it's missing is good damage scaling. And so having Living Armory means that you have essentially, from the beginning of the run, solved your damage scaling needs, and you can focus on just everything else and playing around that. Again, the more units you put on the floor, the better, but even if you just have like Grail and a single unit, 24 bonus attack to both units is a lot of attack, especially again if you have a force multiplier like multi-strike or sweep or trample. Trample also being something that is available in Lazarus. Like, it's a very good path. I cannot overstate how good it is. All that said, onto its ugly stepbrother, Learning Limb. So, Learning Limb is a path that I want to like and don't. This is the path that has the Artificer trigger. Artificer being when any unit on the floor is equipped, rather than when Grail himself specifically is equipped. Anyways, whenever the Artificer trigger is triggered, the attached equipment gains permanent attack. Now, the problem with this is... how do I say this other than just saying it's bad? The problem is, mostly that it's competing against just better paths, particularly Living Armory. Because I could permascale an equipment slowly, or I could just hyperscale an entire floor easily with Living Armory. Again, the problem with Learning Limb is that it's a lot of investment for not very high payoff. And like, there are some tricks you can do to make it a little bit better. Like, it does power up graft units if you are playing the graft unit on that floor, and when the graft unit dies, you can then like replay that equipment onto another unit on that floor to essentially double up on the bonus. But it doesn't matter that much, and you can still do largely comparable or better damage scaling with Living Armory. Similarly, with Learning Limb, you can also do things like try to scale up two separate equipments and then like merge them late game to make one equipment that has been essentially benefiting from the damage scaling that you've been doing all run. But that requires you to have two equipment that you care about and don't also really just want to be merging earlier. Like, it's a lot of hoops to jump through for just not an insane payoff. Like, it's not the worst thing ever, but I have a hard time saying anything like meaningfully positive about Learning Limb. Especially, again, when it's on the same champion who has access to Living Armory, which is just so much better. Anyways, I kind of want to consider putting an F tier. I don't think it warrants that. I do think D is pretty reasonable for Learning Limb, though. Oh, all that said, moving on to It Hungers. This is the one that gives Grail an activated ability to sacrifice an assistant, and then he gains their attack. Or, at rank 2, gains twice their attack, or rank 3 gains 3 times their attack. This is an interesting one. So this is another of those paths where you need some way to make the payoff meaningful. And luckily for Grail, there's a lot of ways to do that in Lazarus. There's even just a couple ways to kind of utilize this path in general. Like, for instance, you can use it as an easy way to get grafts off of your units. One of the big problems with graft units is that not only do you need to like draw into them, but then you need to like play them down, and then you need to get them killed, and then you need to wait so you can get the equipment in your hand, so then you can equip it to the unit that you actually care about, and that can be a slow and problematic process, especially if that graft unit, if that graft equipment is like central to your deck. The main one being Twisted Assistance, Twisted Back, since it gives trample. But with it with it Hungers, you cut out a lot of that, since you will reliably always be able to use his ability so long as you're leaving capacity open to play down the graft unit, which again, it's not hard. All the graft units are one capacity, so you just have to leave one space open. Anyways, it Hungers allows you to do that reliably and easily and focus on other things. Beyond all that, though, it Hungers is also just pretty solid. Again, taking into account that Lazarus does have access to trample, having triple scaling whenever he eats one of the assistants very quickly builds up, especially if you upgrade them with like even the plus 14 attack upgrade at Merchant of Steel. You can also give an assistant like reanimate to make them survive, so you can keep eating them. You can also keep dumping your attack bonuses into that unit, so then you are effectively getting triple the scaling by putting it on the assistant and then having Grail eat them. You can give them Endless to keep bringing them back and have Grail keep eating the same one. Like, there's a lot of things you can do to get massive attack on Grail. And again, if he has trample, he very quickly will just start blowing through the entire enemy line. Even if you don't get trample, Lazarus has a way to give him multi-strike. It also has a way to force out extra attacks with minds of their own. Yada, yada, yada. Again, it's a little more luck dependent than like Living Armory. You're not always going to make it the star of the show, but like, it's not hard to make it Hungers into a very useful piece. There's also other tricks you can do as well. Like, is it Brain Transfer that I'm thinking of? There we go. Yeah, Brain Transfer being the card where you can sacrifice a unit, transfer its attack and all buffs and debuff effects to the front friendly unit. So even if you do whiff on like the trample for Grail, again, you can have him devour a couple of assistants and then use something like Brain Transfer to then convert his attack into being on a unit that will make use of it better. Anyways, point is, Lazarus has, compared to say like Under Legion with Ballet, Lazarus has a lot of ways to make the high damage from it Hungers Grail into something meaningful or even just like game winning on its own. So I think I personally would rate it pretty highly. I think it probably belongs in A, maybe B, but again, looking at what's in B, I don't think it Hungers is on the same level. I do think it deserves A. Certainly not S tier, not alongside like Living Armory, but certainly A, I think, is warranted. Okay. Before we go into the next one, I need to get more water and take a short break. I'll be right back. All right, continuing on. So, next up, we've got Hef, one of the truly new champions. Hef is pretty great. A little weird. Little fiddly, I will say. But she's pretty solid. First path, handy. This is the one where she gets the ability to equip multiple equipment. So at rank 1, she gains 1 additional equipment. Rank 2, 2 additional equipment. Rank 3, she gets trample and goes up to 3 additional equipment. Also of note that she gets weapon craft, the ability where she can generate a equipment every other turn. It's not a particularly good equipment, but in the context of Railforged with their forge mechanic, being able to create equipment is still very useful because she can turn even a bad equipment into something powerful with the forge points. Anyways, Handy is a weird one to rate. I like this path on the whole. I think it's a surprisingly versatile path, and there's a lot of, well, both fun and powerful equipment combinations you can do. Like, obviously you can do something like just stacking multiple Bloodthirsty Blades on her and then be getting a bunch of, like, damage scaling for every kill that she gets. But you could also do things like put multiple Shields of Wing on her so that she's triggering the Revenge trigger multiple times every time she gets attacked into. Or similarly, in like if she's paired with Wurmkin, you can give her multiple of Forgotten Trade so that every time she gets attacked, she's generating a bunch of charges. Yada, yada, yada. The problem is, again, bit dependent on clan combo and dependent more than a lot of other things kind of on what specific equipment you're offered. Even so, I think it's still a pretty solid path. Because kind of no matter what you're offered, because of the ability to forge equipment and the fact that she gets trample later on, you have the ability to turn her into a pretty powerful unit. And the ability to get trample is helpful for Railforged in particular. They're a very strong clan, but they can struggle a bit with wave clear since they don't have any access to like sweep outside of the pseudo sweep of Sentry Turret. They don't have like a ton of like strong damage spells. I mean, anyways, the point is, I think it's a deceptively good path, even if it can be kind of fiddly. I think B is about right for Handy. There's a lot of ways to make Handy Hef into just kind of a powerhouse, something that can carry the run on her own. I mean, on her own in quotes, kind of there. But the point being is that like she can be the central point to your run. And even if she's not, like the trample helps clean up waves. You can pretty easily boost her attack. You can use her multiple equipment focus in a variety of different powerful ways. I think surprisingly good. Next up, we got Weaponsmith. This is similar to Living Armory Grail. This is the one where she has an Artificer trigger to give plus attack and armor to an equipped friendly unit. Also, like Handy, she also gets the Weapon Craft ability, but unlike Handy, where it always stays at rank 1, Weaponsmith upgrades it to rank 2 and rank 3, so she makes better and better equipment. Now, this is similar to Living Armory, a very good path, and plays out fairly similarly. It's just a bit less strong. She does give attack and armor on the Artificer trigger, which is nice because Living Armory only gives attack. But in exchange, you're only buffing a single unit at a time. It's still good. There's still a lot of units where that is more than enough. Like, again, if you're pairing it with something with like sweep, or you're pairing it with like a Sentry Turret or Plague Doctor, whatever, it often is not really going to matter that you are buffing only a single unit. One important note, though, is that unlike Living Armory Grail, where you are equipping Grail himself to get the bonus, since this is an Artificer trigger, it does mean that you effectively can't be equipping the unit you're trying to buff with like a real equipment, at least not if you are trying to repeatedly get the Artificer trigger. Whereas you can like give some meaningful equipment to your carry unit while using Living Armory Grail, and then just dump all of your like excess equipment into Grail for the attack scaling. All that to say, Weaponsmith is still very good. Absolutely deserves to be in A tier. I don't think it quite bridges into S tier, but it's a very good path. The amount of defense and offense that it can give is very strong. It's not very hard to utilize. It's not hard to build around. Just a very good path. Now for Metalworker. Metalworker is the weird one. It's also, I think, maybe the wordiest champion path in the game. This is the one that summons, on summon, adds scrap metal cards to your hand. The scrap metal cards being cards that do nothing but stay in your hand. And then end of turn, she applies Refine to scrap metal cards in hand. And then at rank 3, she also doubles Smelt bonuses on her floor. So, the basic idea being that she generates scrap metal and then makes them more valuable to smelt turn after turn after turn. And then when you do eventually smelt them, you get a huge burst of Ember and you get a huge burst of Forge points. Now, I don't know what I want to say about Metalworker. I mean, right off the bat, I'll tell you this. It's either B or C. The thing about Metalworker is it's a bit fiddly, and I think it is more contingent upon what you're offered to support with it. In the ideal world, you have some good way to utilize the high Ember that she generates. Like, you are pairing it with an X-cost card like Railforged Spike or Prismal Dust, which would generate a bunch of damage shields, or the Lazarus Spike, which generates a bunch of Reanimate, yada, yada, yada. Even so, you don't necessarily have to be using the high Ember to get value out of her. The fact that she's doubling smelt yields and that the scrap metal themselves are worth a lot of smelt means that you can also use her as just a way to generate a lot of forge points. Obviously, again, you need some time to do that. You need reliable ways to smelt when you want to smelt. You need some payoff for the forge points. Which is not super difficult, but again, it is more hoops to jump through. I have a hard time placing this one. My gut is to place it at C, but I think it could also go at B pretty comfortably. It certainly doesn't belong higher than that. There are definitely ways for it to pop off and be pretty incredible. But I think on average, that's not going to be the main experience. I think I'm going to put it at C. Again, if I go back through later, we might bump that up. But for the moment, I think C feels about right. Okay, on to Herzl, the other truly new champion. Herzl is... he's okay. Not my favorite champion. I think he's a bit kind of boring. Well, maybe not boring, but he's not as exciting and build around as I want him to be for the most part. But he's still a pretty good champion. Like, it also helps that Railforged itself is just such a strong, like, powerful, versatile clan that every time you are playing Herzl and Hef, you are supported by a clan that has a lot of great tools. All that's it. For Blacksmith, his first path. This is the path that starts with Burst. Burst being the temporary multi-strike, so he hits additional times, but then it wears off. And then on strike, he gains forge points, and when equipped, he gains additional burst. Now, Blacksmith is a bit of a weird path. Basically, the point of Blacksmith is that you send him out you let him burn through his burst and generate a ton of forge points, and then you kind of stop caring about him and use those forge points to forge an amazing unit or to forge a powerful equipment or whatever. Obviously, you can use him as more of a carry unit, but it's kind of hard to do so. There's very few ways to actually like continuously generate equipment. There's basically only two ways, which is Truffles, which is a unit specific to Under Legion, and it's a non-banner unit, and it's also kind of fiddly, and it has a 2-turn cooldown. Or, and this is setting aside that Hef has an ability to create equipment, because you can't have Hef at the same time as Herzl, outside of mutators. But anyways, also in Railforged, there is Armament Drive, which generates equipment for each unequipped unit on the floor. So you can use that as another way to generate a lot of equipment to jam into Herzl. So there are ways to like utilize the burst refresh, but mostly that's not something you're going to build around as your main game plan, and it's something where you're just going to use as a way to, again, give him a bunch of extra burst, so he can generate a bunch of forge points, so then you can transition into something else slightly later. Like, pretty commonly with Blacksmith, I will set up additional deployable equipment just so I can equip them to Herzl one after another in deployment. So then he starts turn 1 with like 12 attacks or 15 attacks or whatever. And then he just generates a massive amount of forge points, and we make a super turret or make a super equipment, whatever. Anyways, all that said, it's a decent path. It's a little hard to rate it low because, again, Railforged as a clan is just good. Railforged is basically never going to be bad. And so just being able to generate a bunch of forge points, even if you're essentially just going to kind of forget about your champion afterwards, is still rather strong. I think it pretty comfortably goes into C tier. Certainly not my favorite path to use because I like my champions to not be, something that I set down and then sacrifice after they've outlived their usefulness. But even so, Blacksmith it's pretty decent. Now, Pyresmith. Pyresmith is, again, not my favorite to use, but it is pretty cool. So the two things about Pyresmith are, number one, it has a Celebrate trigger, which is to say if you finish the battle with Herzl alive, your Pyre will permanently gain extra attack and HP. I don't really care about that too much, but obviously, it is good. It is technically making it... It is a little deceptive how good that is. It's giving you more HP across the run, since it fills the HP at the same time that's giving you the more max HP. It also means that every time you do go to a node to heal your Pyre, you are healing for more, because the healing is percentage-based, so the higher your max HP is, the more you're healing. And then also by having higher Pyre attack, it means that you're going to hit the breakpoint more easily where an enemy is dying on the first attack or second attack, whatever, without surviving to hit your Pyre third, fourth, whatever time. So it makes it gives you a lot of extra wiggle room. Also going into the Titans, it means that you're killing Dominion a little faster because your Pyre is naturally a little stronger. It also gives you, again, a lot more wiggle room for the Titans being just a Pyre HP check of a battle. Again, I don't care too strongly about that, especially the Titan aspect of that, because the Titans are already largely just a victory lap of a fight. So little of my consideration goes into caring about the Titan fight in any given run that making the Titan fight a little faster, easier, isn't that valuable. Even so, the other aspect of Pyresmith is the truly exciting part. So, he gets an active ability called Pyre Speak, where you can add a Pyre Shot that costs 0 to your hand with Consume. Pyre Shot being the spell that makes your pyre attack on a floor. What this means is that essentially every time you pop it, you have a spell that will, for the most part, wipe a floor of enemies, which is pretty good. It's a bit unwieldy in the early ranks because he has like a 6-turn cooldown. But by the time you hit rank 3, it's down to 2 turns, which is unfortunately not a 1-turn cooldown, but 2 turns is still pretty great. And if you are paired with Pyreborn, you can bring it down to a 1-turn cooldown, which is very good. Anyways, even so, point is, it's a lot of guaranteed power. Because unlike something like Strangler Wildenton, where you have to invest in Wildenton's attack power to be getting value out of the sweep, your Pyre is always going to be pretty strong. And also, it is immune to, like, sap, yada, yada, yada. Like, and you know, by keeping Herzl alive, you're making your Pyre stronger every fight. Not to mention that Railforged also has a couple other ways to buff your Pyre. The ideal being to get the artifact Fused Pyre Shard, which permanently increases your Pyre's attack every time your Pyre kills an enemy. You can also just draft Pyre Shot potentially throughout the course of a run, since it is just an actual rare card. So you can also double up on the Pyre attack by, you know, building around that spell. Anyways, it's a pretty strong path. It's a little fiddly because Herzl himself doesn't have like great stats, and the cooldown on his ability in the early game is rather long. But even so, having a solve target problem button is pretty nice. Like, for instance, going into the Savagery fight, you can use it turn 1 to wipe out like the sweep enemies while you're getting set up. Going into Entropy, you can use it to be killing off the silence enemies guaranteed. It also kills the Purified Souls because it is the Pyre doing an attack, not actually a spell, so it's not blocked by the spell shields. It's just good. It's a pretty solid path. I probably ranted about it longer than I needed to. All that said, I don't know, maybe A. It definitely is at least B. I think it probably warrants A, though again, comparing it to some of the other things in this rank, you know what, let's put it B for now. Yeah, let's put it B. On to his third path, which is Enduring Steel. This is the one that makes it so forge points are weaker but permanent. Oh, this cat is in the way. Enduring Steel is a bit weird. It has a pretty bad early game, which can be pretty notable. I don't think it's like an insane problem, but it is definitely a consideration. Because instead of forge points granting as much as they normally do, like a decent burst, you are heavily limiting their output. And also, in Ring 1 and Ring 2, you have a lot less freedom to be forging something you care about. So you kind of just have to take what you can get, which means that, you know, the first couple rings are a bit of a mishmash while you get your deck more suited to support what you're doing. But if you do start forging things you care about, having permanent attack power and permanent armor going into mid game and late game is really good, and especially since you can then dupe that unit once or twice or more and be doubling up on all the investment that you gave. It has some great payoffs. All in all, I think it's got to go C tier. Feels maybe too low, but I think just kind of the awkwardness of the early game, I think, is enough to hold it back a bit. It's also a bit weird because, like, while the permanent scaling is nice, you can also do similar things by just forging every battle. Like, you don't... Forging is strong enough that you don't really need the permanent stats to get good value out of building around Forge. But again, it can be a pretty strong path. All right, on to Lion's Mane. Lion's Mane is definitely one of the strongest champs, for sure. She's very good. I mean, again, Under Legion as a whole, as a clan, is just good anyways. But Lion's Mane has 3 good paths. And 2 of them like heavily support and enhance what the clan is doing. That said, starting with the first one, Everbloom. This is the one where she spawns on Incant, and at later ranks then also spawns with Etch, which is to say whenever you consume a spell. Everbloom is a bit weird. Often it is correct in a run to just take the first rank of it and then cross path to one of her other 2 paths. Since if you're not doing a lot of consuming, the Etch doesn't matter. That said, if you are building into the Etch, she can give you an insane amount of fungi generation just on her own. But even with the Incant, like, it's a great path. Absolutely deserves to be S tier. Again, it supports what Under Legion wants to be doing, and even if you aren't building around the rallies, it is still essentially giving you free defense, free replenishable defense, by just making a fungi stack. It's just good. It's great. It's reliable. It's helpful. Also, the fact that, like, fungi can block a flying boss's, like, high damage attack. How to even say this? The point I'm trying to make is that, like, a single fungi can be worth, like, 30 points of defense, essentially. Which is really nice. Anyways, the point is, it's just... There's not too much to actually say about this path because there's not much nuance to it. It's just... It makes a bunch of fungi for free. It's very good. It's what Under Legion wants to be doing. Next up is one of the more contentious ones, which is to say Maneater. This is the one that gives her an activated ability. At base, it applies Sap and Decay to a unit. She can use it once per turn. Later on, she then also starts applying Mute at rank 2 and 3. Now, here's why it's contentious. I think Maneater is fine, not incredible. There are a lot of people who have latched on to Maneater as being one of the best paths in the game. I don't think it deserves that. It's a good path, but I think people like really overestimate what it's doing for you and how important it is. Like, yes, I recognize that it is a way to shut down like Dominion Seraph or to shut down like the Titans. Fine. There's a bunch of other ways to do that. You don't really need Mute to be successful. And again, more to the point, it's an opportunity cost in picking Maneater over building into her other paths. Everbloom brings Rally online and does it very well. Also gives you a ton of defense, which is essentially what Maneater is purporting to do, is giving you defense. But the fact that you can only target one enemy per turn with it is fairly limiting. Even if you can, like, neuter a boss, again, that doesn't matter that much to me. That is not the main problem for most runs to be solving. The other thing is like, again, talking about opportunity costs, the other path, Spore Singer, helps guarantee that you have some wave clear. It dramatically increases your damage output. It can take a deck from being, shaky offense to incredible offense. Or take good offense into kill a flying boss early offense. Which again, I know I'm rambling here because I'm having trouble getting my thoughts in order. The point is basically just that, like, Maneater's good, but it is largely not filling a purpose you need it to fill. Like, if you're taking it to kill or to, like, shut down bosses, there are, like, if you're taking it for defense, it is not doing enough to solve your defensive needs. You still need to be investing in defense other ways, because you can only neuter one enemy a turn. It's good, but, like, it's not going to do enough for you. Meanwhile, you are devoting your champion and some capacity to something that could be doing so much more for you. It could be turning on all of your rally units. It could be making them more reliable. It could be supercharging your damage output. Yada, yada, yada. All in all, I think Maneater is like B tier. It's good, but I think it's pretty overrated, and I would basically always be taking one of the other two paths. Moving on to Spore Singer, I already talked about this a little bit. This is the one that gives her action applied Decay 1 to enemy units, and whenever a unit gains Decay, it gains additional stacks. So +2 at rank 1, +3 at rank 2, +5 at rank 3. So, there's a couple key things to this. First off, that action trigger is essentially never actually Decay 1, because it is affected by her own passive effect. So even at rank 1, when it says apply Decay 1 to enemy units, what it actually means is apply Decay 3 to enemy units. So it is doing 9 damage to all units passively every turn. Additionally, that because it's an action trigger, not a resolve trigger, means that it does continue working during Relentless, because it will fire once every round of combat, rather than only firing at the end. I mention all this to say that Spore Singer does a surprising amount for you. Early game, it guarantees that you've got wave clear. It gives you backline access to help kill off the Scourge dudes, to help kill off the 6 attack, 2 HP enemies. It can help you get collectors. It can help like soften up other enemies. It does a surprising amount just by existing, regardless of what else you're doing. Later on, pairing her with like Spore Launcher takes their decay from is it Decay 1 or Decay 2? Am I crazy on this? You would think I would know offhand. Yeah, I thought it was Decay 2. Wanted to make sure I wasn't lying. Anyways, it takes it from Decay 2 to Decay 4 every time you rally, or later to Decay 7 every time you rally. Like, that's a huge damage increase. Also works with, like, Moral Mistress. Also works with the variety of other decay things in the clan, like Pandemic. It also works every time you propagate, of which there's a lot of ways to be propagating a lot in clan. Like, the point is, like, everything you're doing with decay, Spore Singer greatly increases the damage output. Which can seem like overkill, but how to say this? It allows you to focus your efforts where you need to. Like, if you need more offense, you can focus harder on your offense and let Spore Singer double down on it. If you think your offense is good, you can focus on it. Whatever. I'm rambling at this point. The point is, Spore Singer it supercharges what your clan is already doing. It makes good things even better and more reliable, and ensures that you have a strong early game with her action trigger. It's just a great path. Anyways, all that said, I don't think it's on the same rank as Everbloom. I would say probably A for this. Maybe S, but like I don't want to be throwing out S willy-nilly. But it is a good path. I think A is probably fitting for it. Also, you can tell that I'm flagging a bit. I'm recording this in the early morning, and I've already been going for like 2 hours talking nonstop. But it's fun to talk about this game. And I hope it makes for an entertaining watch. Anyways, on to Orechi, another of the just like far and away best champions in this game. Orechi is another of those champions with 3 good paths. I will say one of his paths is weaker than the other 2, but even so, it still is pretty solid. That said, Brewmaster, the first one we're talking about, is definitely the weaker one. This one is the one that gives him the ability to mix. At rank 1, he mixes once. At rank 2, he mixes twice. At rank 3, he mixes 3 times. Now, at first glance, this path can seem a bit underwhelming. And I will agree that at rank 1, being only able to mix once every 3 turns is not, like, insane. But going into mid-game and going into late game, having a bunch of extra mixing is rather good. Like, deceptively so. Also, before I forget to say it, it is also worth noting that he has pretty decent stats. Not like top of the line, but at rank 3 with Brewmaster, he's got 75 attack and 40 HP, which is pretty solid for a 2-capacity champion. Especially a 2-capacity champion that is doing something else. Anyways, back on topic. The way to look at Brewmaster is essentially that mix is so versatile and so powerful that his ability is basically again, sort of a solve target problem button. Like, if you are in a battle and you need better damage scaling, you get a red potion, then you mix your red potion 3 times, and you can stack up a bunch of attack. You can stack up some attack and some lifesteal, some attack and some damage shields, whatever. If you need to survive a flying boss, you can do that with either red potion or with a green potion. If you need to stop an enemy from destroying your pyre because you accidentally let an enemy get to top floor and be buffed by like Kale's vampiric cherubs or whatever, you can mix to get root. You can mix to get melee weakness. To speed up the Titan fight, or again, to help kill one of the heavies before you're fully set up. You can mix to get a bunch of reanimate, you can mix to get spikes, you can mix to get unstable, so you can buff your self-unstable strategy, or so you can kill one of the silence enemies, or whatever. Like, it does what you need it to do. Mix is very good. So, even with a 3-turn cooldown, being able to mix into essentially whatever your deck needs at the time. And obviously there's a little bit of randomness to it because, you know, you still have to get the right like potion color. But again, you have a fair deal of control over that because his starter card also mixes. And so you can play around that by mixing ahead of time to set up the right color and then supercharge it with his ability. Anyways, all in all, like, it's still a very good path, even if it's worse than his other 2. It does have, like, savior syndrome of, like, why pick it when you could be picking his other 2, but even so, it is still a good path, and when you use it, it's not going to disappoint. Except maybe in the early game. All in all, I think it deserves a B rank. Maybe C, but I think B is still pretty fair for it. No, let's drop it down to C. Again, I'm like looking at what else is in B. I don't know, maybe. Sure, let's leave it in C for now. It maybe deserves B. Moving on, though. On to Reanimator. This being the path where he starts with a bit of Reanimate, or at least does at rank 2 and 3, and then on a Resolve, gains Reanimate and Unstable. Essentially, what he's doing is he's turning himself into a bomb. This is a very powerful and often misunderstood path. Often I hear people question the usefulness of this because what they are trying to do is they're putting Orechi in the back of their team and they're letting him tick down his Unstable to do a small amount of damage to the whole enemy team every turn. That's not the point of Reanimator. The point of Reanimator is for him to be a frontliner. Because Unstable triggers not just at the end of the turn, but every single time that Reanimate triggers. So, even with a small amount of Reanimate on it, or a small amount of Unstable on him, if you're putting him in the front, every time an enemy attacks him, he will blow up and damage the entire enemy line. So, for instance, at rank 3, when he is gaining 18 Unstable per turn, after a single turn of gaining Unstable, that is enough for him to kill every backliner on basically every wave. Obviously, you do need to supplement his Reanimate to keep him alive, even with him regaining 1 Reanimate every turn. But similar to what I talked about before with some of the other champion paths, this essentially is a champion path where you are converting defense into offense. It allows you to focus on building up Reanimate and solving both your offensive and defensive needs at the same time. It certainly helps if you are also building some Unstable onto him so you aren't fully at the mercy of his own scaling. But again, his own scaling can be deceptively strong. Because when there are multiple enemies attacking into it each turn, plus you are getting the proc at the end of the turn, like even 18 Unstable can end up doing 100 plus damage to every enemy on the floor. But again, use things like Tome of Horrors or Unstable Reaction to... Is that even called Unstable Reaction? Is that Explosive Reaction? I know I should be just not losing my train of thought. Yeah, Explosive Reaction. Anyways, dump some Unstable into him, and it goes a long way, is what I'm trying to say. It is a very good path. I would definitely call it his best path. It is certainly an S tier path. I know I'm going to get people telling me that how can I possibly rate it higher than Mad Scientist, which I am about to do. Mad Scientist being the Incant Unstable path. And here's why. So here's the deal. Mad Scientist is a good, powerful, strong path. But it does have problems and limitations. Namely, okay, where to begin with this? There's a couple issues Mad Scientist needs to solve. Namely, so one of the main problems with Mad Scientist is that it has a much harder time into Relentless than like Reanimator does. Reanimator allows you to be scaling damage turn to turn to turn because you're constantly building up Unstable, and so as long as you are keeping your Reanimate high, you are able to scale that Unstable both to do wave clear and to kill the boss. Mad Scientist, on the other hand, is inconsistent turn to turn. It can be all of the power you need, but generally speaking, going into like a boss, you're not going to be applying enough Unstable to be killing that boss just with Orechi's output. It's a little weird to evaluate it like this because it does depend heavily on how many units are spawning with the boss. because if it's something like, when a Thane is spawning with like 4 purified souls plus her statue or whatever, like, yeah, you're getting way more value out of the team-wide incant over when you're up against a boss that spawns with like 1 single enemy. Anyways, the point being, though, is that Mad Scientist is much more prone to problems. If you ever get a bad turn where you are not incanting as much as you want, like, that can let a wave leak, or that could be the turn that you're rolling into Relentless. It also makes it harder for you to utilize, like, higher cost spells, like, for instance, Spike of the Legion, or Leak, whatever it's called, the Reanimate Spike. Or things like Tome of Horrors, which is a 3-cost spell. Again, you're not locked out of using these things. Obviously, you can use them, but it is a little harder. Also, one of the benefits of the self-unstable of Reanimator is that, again, you will end up killing a lot of enemies before they end up actually attacking. Since they will attack into Orechi, he will explode and kill off a bunch of backliners. Whoever's still alive will attack, yada yada, keep going. So he naturally will kill off like the sweep enemies or the enemies that apply corruption when they attack, yada yada yada, before they have a chance. Mad Scientist doesn't do that. Mad Scientist, you have to wait for the end of the turn for the enemies to explode, or you need to detonate them yourself with spells, or you need to have like something like Test Subject Alpha to detonate them with a quick attack. Obviously, these are overcomable problems, but they are problems. It does mean that it can be more difficult for you to weather the attacks since you need to be managing both offense and defense. It means that yada, yada, yada. Anyways, the point being is like, it's a good path, but I do think people tend to overlook that it does still have problems. Not that Reanimator is without problems, obviously. It's just that those problems are fairly easy and self-contained to solve, and the payoff is massive for doing so. All in all, I'm still going to put Mad Scientist in A tier. It's a great path. It's just that I think people, again, kind of overlook some of its issues, and a non-trivial amount of time misunderstand how Reanimator is supposed to be used. Not saying nobody understands how to use Reanimator, but I do commonly see people not understanding how to really get value out of it. On to a much less exciting champion. We have Penumbra. I hate Penumbra. I think Penumbra has a very cool visual design. I think Penumbra is very boring and bad to play with. All that said, to start us off with Architect. Architect was pretty decent in Monster Train 1. It was boring, but it was pretty decent. I would say in Monster Train 2, Architect is pretty bad. It still has the same sort of argument for it that you're gaining essentially an extra unit, since it, this being the one that generates capacity on summon. So at rank 2, it is capacity neutral. At rank 3, it is capacity +1. The problem is that Penumbra itself isn't doing that much for you. Like, yeah, it's better than nothing, but compare Architect to like any other champion path, especially most of the new champion paths, and it's just better. Also, like, on the note of Architect 3 being capacity positive, like, all that's really saying is that because Penumbra naturally takes up 3 capacity. And so you're only getting 1 extra capacity by playing Architect 3. It's not that impressive. especially compared to something like Repeater Echo Right, which has higher attack than Penumbra, Architect Penumbra, while also doing a real meaningful service for you. Same with Shellsmith. It has higher attack, doesn't take up that much capacity, does a thing actually worthwhile to your run. Architect Penumbra just sits there. The best that can be said about Architect is that it is inoffensive. It's just bad. At best, I think I can put Architect in D. If you're someone who just wants, early game value, I guess maybe you might rate Architect higher, but, I have a hard time calling Architect particularly good in this game. Doesn't have amazing stats. It's not even capacity neutral until the second rank. And the third rank, it's an okay chunk of damage that does nothing for you. Also doesn't have great defense. Anyways, I might even put it in F. I don't know that it fully deserves that, but my disdain for Penumbra does run high. We might move it later, but I think for the moment, let's put it in F. On to Monstrous. This being the one where he gets trample and increases in size and stats. Monstrous is pretty bad. Again, I know there are some players who... How to say this? I think the best thing I can say about Penumbra, and something that I know some other players do very value about Penumbra, is that it can be pretty decent in the first couple rings. Because the higher base stats matter a lot more, and especially with Glutton, which we'll talk about more in a moment, it can just be kind of a guarantee that you're making it through ring 2 and ring 3. And gives you, again, similar to what I was talking about with Mystic Hammer or Dune way earlier, it allows you to be a little more choosy and still make it through the early game in good shape. That said, I don't really care about that, and I don't even really agree that Monstrous is all that good at doing that. Monstrous doesn't have great HP. At rank 1, it's 30 HP, which is not terrible, but for a 4 capacity unit, that's not a lot. Especially because it's also making it harder for you to feed morsels to, which is what his starter card does. Obviously, you could be feeding the morsels to other things, but you're pretty limited on capacity. It's just not great. I just really don't love Monstrous. I do think I probably need to put Monstrous at D. I don't think it quite warrants F because there is the argument to be made that it's at least good early game. Well, good quote-unquote early game. But it's not great. And there are plenty of other champions that are good early game that are also good middle game or late game, which is not the case with Monstrous. Also, if you're going all the way through Monstrous, the fact that you have to take a capacity upgrade just to even fit Monstrous 3 is really a problem. Because unlike, Gilda, who also takes up a whole floor on her own, Gilda is only 4 capacity and stays 4 capacity, with Guildmother specifically, and then generates the egg after you play her. And so while she does take up 5 capacity, you can actually still play another unit on their floor. She's only ever taking up actually 4 of your capacity during deployment. Whereas Monstrous requires you to take a capacity upgrade to even use it. Or use the capacity rooms. But again, then you have to set up a deployable room, and at least one of them takes deployment ember. It's the payoff for all the hoops you have to jump through to even use Monstrous is not there. Trample is good, but again, in a world where there are multiple heavies with a lot of HP, having Penumbra have 250 attack and not a ton of HP and be hard to fit with other units or even to feed morsels to is not great. It is not a good path. Anyways, on to Glutton. Again, we already talked about this with Monstrous, but really the best thing that can be said about Glutton is its early game potential. Again, I know there's a couple people who actually would put Penumbra, especially Glutton Penumbra, up in B or even A tier just because it essentially guarantees you getting out of the early game. I don't think that's warranted. I recognize the value. I don't think it deserves that much weighting for that role. Because again, there are a lot of other champion paths that are similarly kind of winning you the early game, but are also meaningful later. Technically, Glutton is better than Monstrous in that it can still perform some value later. It can win you Relentless. It can also potentially be good if you are mixing it with like Shroud Spike and like Furnace Tap or some way to gain Trample, be that cross-pathing into Monstrous, even though that like really weakens your scaling, or getting the Umbra Stone for the Trample. Like, there are ways to use Glutton, but it's still not very impressive, and often just using a different, better unit is going to pay off more nicely. Like, most banner units will fill that job to a better degree than Glutton will, kind of. I may be being a little overly harsh, and admittedly, this is a bit of a playstyle thing. I tend not to build around morsels all that often, but even so, I don't think Glutton is particularly great. Moving on to Primordium. Primordium is pretty fabulous. Primordium is good. Again, depends a little bit on clan combo, since Sweep is certainly less common in Monster Train 2. Obviously, you know, there are still some clan combos, like if you get paired with Awoken or Stygian, where there's a fairly good likelihood that you can pick up a Sweep unit easily if that's what you want. I mentioned Sweep since the whole gimmick of Primordium is that he supercharges another unit. So ideally, you want to be supercharging something that has a force multiplier, and ideally, then you can use that to do most or all of your wave clear. And so a Sweep unit is kind of the classic, obvious thing to pair him with. So little weaker in that regard. That said, with the addition of equipment, Primordium on the whole did get a fair bit stronger, since you now have more ways, and especially ways that you can apply during deployment to buff Primordium stats, so then you can be passing on those powerful stats like reliably and powerfully. All that said, talking specifics, Superfood definitely deserves either S or A tier. I think it probably deserves S tier. Again, little contingent upon your clan combo, but even if you are not in a clan combo that has like good buffs to pass on, like for instance Hellhorn's Rage or Banish Valor, yada yada yada, doesn't matter a ton. Like, Umbra still has damage shields, it still has Rage, still has multi-strike. You also have access to multi-strike and Sweep from Merchant of Arms, potentially. Like, Superfood is still very good, kind of regardless of clan combo. It just is extra good in certain clan combos. It's a very good path. A lot of things you can do with it. Moving on to Stalwart Snack, probably also deserves S tier. Stalwart Snack was already good in Monster Train 1, but mostly as purely a cross path. it still is pretty good to do cross-pathing with Stalwart Snack, just because like dipping into superfood is often worthwhile. Or just picking up a rank of aggressive edible is also often useful, since Stalwart Snack can end up with more buffet than you can utilize sometimes. But the thing that made Stalwart Snack so good is the addition of equipment. Because the problem with Stalwart Snack in Monster Train 1 was that you needed reliable and strong ways to buff Primordium stats to make it worth spreading out that scaling across so many extra turns. Because, like, Superfood has the benefit of allowing you to pass on buffs and debuffs. Or buffs and statuses, whatever. And then also, notably, increases Primordium's HP to 10. And so that extra HP can be like very useful as damage scaling or defense scaling right off the bat. In this game, being able to just dump a lot of different equipment onto Primordium and then have that power bonus be scaled out over like 5 turns is great. It often will outpace aggressive edible, which is supposed to be the like attack focused pathway. Will often break even or outpace it pretty easily, especially since you can use like glass cannon or other things to buff it. Anyways, the point is, Stalwart Snack is great as both a cross path and is solid as, you know, going full down that path. Also, it does now get higher stats at rank 3, which it didn't used to get. Goes to 10-10. Bit late for that to be like the primary draw of the champion path, but it's still nice to have. Anyways, point is, it's a great path. It's great to cross path. It's also great to just go all the way down depending on what kind of equipment you see or what other sorts of scaling you have. Also, again, deployment phase does make it easier to scale since there's a couple units that will be able to scale Primordium for you. Anyways, rambling aside, aggressive edible. We kind of touched on this. It's quite good. It's not quite as good as the others. Still belongs in A rank. It's doing the same things as Superfood and Stalwart Snack, just a little less good for the most part. But even then, at rank 3, it's 60 attack, buffet 3, getting 180 attack to a unit over 3 turns, while also having Primordium hitting for 60 damage every turn. It's not bad. It's just not as insane as what the other two can do. Moving on to Prince. Prince is a bit weird. He's okay. I would say he's on the lower end of power in Monster Train 2. Went from being pretty solidly middle of the pack Monster Train 1 to being a little on the weak end Monster Train 2, but he's not bad. Talking specifics, Brawler is another of those paths that I hear people saying all the time that they think it's exceptionally weak. I largely disagree. I will somewhat agree that it can have some problems early game. I think people overstate those problems, but in the first like ring or two, it can be a bit of an issue. Specifically, mostly ring 1, but even so, I don't think you should have trouble getting out of ring 1. You might just have a bad ring 1. The problem being that his base stats are just so low. And unlike Fel, who also has innate multi-strike and kind of bad base stats, she has built-in scaling. He does not. So, as long as you can get scaling, Brawler does become pretty solid. Even from the early rings, having just Multi-strike is pretty good. Hellhorn has a lot of ways to make use of that, particularly like Ritual Battle or Fledgling Imp. Later on, it scales to be pretty crazy since he gets 5 attacks at rank 3, which can be essentially all the attacking you need. Since he can be clearing essentially 5 enemies while also being a 5 times multiplier on any scaling you're doing, which is really good. The problem is getting there and making sure that you have enough damage scaling. I don't really consider the damage scaling a problem for Brawler outside of like the very early game because, again, scaling is the name of the game in Monster Train. You're basically looking for scaling in every run. You are always going to be offered some form of scaling. It's just that sometimes that scaling might not be super compatible with Brawler. But even then, that's fairly rare. Again, there's a lot of ways for Hellhorn to make good use of Brawler. Anyways, all in all, I think it probably deserves C, maybe B, but I think probably C. I think the early game is notable enough to bring it down a little bit, even if it's pretty decent overall. And I do think the like late game guarantee of having a unit with 5 attacks is noteworthy. On to Reaper. Reaper is one of the paths that got the greatest glow ups in the transition to Monster Train 2. It was exceptionally awful in Monster Train 1. Easily, far and away, one of the worst paths in the game. There was essentially no reason to ever pick it. It is now pretty solid. I will say, probably even Prince's best path. Just because the addition of the activated ability where he can attack immediately, and then especially the fact that it goes down to cooldown 1 at rank 3 is very good. It's essentially like having built-in multi-strike, though also if you can give him multi-strike, it's even better than built-in multi-strike. Also, he's just better stats than he had in Monster Train 1, and the changes to capacity in particular make it much easier to slot Reaper into a floor and still be doing meaningful things with your other units. So it is much easier to just kind of put Reaper Prince down, let him do his own thing, and actually rely on his Slay trigger to scale him a fair amount. It's definitely way better than Monster Train 1. I will say, I think probably B. I don't think we can justify A. Definitely can't justify higher. Certainly is better than... I mean, I say this, and then I'm looking at what else is in C. You know what? Maybe it does belong in C. Yeah, I think C is actually appropriate based on what else I've placed here. We actually might want to move Mystic Hammer down to C. I think that actually probably is warranted here. Now that we've defined the B's looking kind of different. Okay, moving on to Wrathful. Where Reaper got a lot better, Wrathful got a lot worse. The problem for Wrathful is kind of multifaceted. Mostly it's a numbers thing. It did get a bit of buffs at one point, but I think it still just needs a higher bump. I think it needs to scale the armor on Slay a bit better, and it needs to build up attack a bit faster with the Revenge. Because the other like half of this is that what Wrathful really needs to do to be self-sufficient and to be like meaningfully contributing to the team is it needs to be killing at least one unit per turn so it can offset the amount of damage taken. The problems with this are, number one, enemies on average are doing more damage in Monster Train 2, so even if he is slaying a single enemy per turn, you've often taken more damage than the armor you're gaining, which is not altogether necessarily a bad thing. It is kind of bad for the game for champions to be too self-sufficient. Even so, the point being is that even if you are building into Wrathful, you are not getting enough payoff from its gimmick. The second and kind of more meaningful problem is that a lot of the enemies that Wrathful Prince is going to be attacking into are the, like, at least in the late game, are the, like, 500 or 300 HP heavies. And Wrathful needs a fair bit of build-up before it can take down a single one of those. And that's not great. Because, again, that's like multiple turns where you're missing out on the Slay trigger. Unless you're doing something like pairing Wrathful with Awoken or Lazarus and getting spikes. But, again, that's very clan combo contingent and also not always going to be applicable to your needs. Like, it's a lot of hoops for not enough payoff. All that said, I do think Wrathful needs to go down to D. Don't think it deserves F. It's not good, though. Oh, on to Queen. Queen is another of those champions who is on a bit of the weaker end, but is okay solid. I think, again, people on the whole are a little too harsh on Queen. I think they underestimate what she can do. But she is a little less reliable than some of the other champions. And doesn't have quite as high payoff. She definitely took a hit with the removal of the unit fusion system. Because, like, imps are still good in Monster Train 2, but they're certainly less good than when you could fuse two imps together. And because Queen is so, like, built around imps, having imps get weaker means she gets weaker. All that said, starting with Imp Parade, this is the one where on resolve she generates an imp, starts with a Queen's Impling, rank 2 turns into a Fledgling Imp, rank 3 is both a Fledgling Imp and a Welder Helper. Fledgling Imp being the one that adds rage to the entire floor, Welder Helper gives armor to the front unit. Also, she reduces the cost of imps on her floor by 1. Imp Parade is a bit weird. It is generally best as a crosspath, specifically with Imperialist, which we'll get to in a moment. On the whole, Imp Parade it's fine. Kind of the best thing about it is that it gives Fledgling Imps at rank 2. Again, Fledgling Imps, little weak in this game. Still pretty solid, though. Especially with the changes to capacity, both with the boss capacity upgrade giving 2 capacity and Smidgestone being a shop upgrade. It's much easier for you to be able to put a lot of units on a floor. And so being able to, for sure, have guaranteed every turn damage scaling is really nice. And it doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't take up a slot in your draw. She's generating it every turn. It doesn't take any Ember because the imp itself is free. It's also a chump blocker, so you can use it to block an enemy. You can also block like the corruption from Dominion in the Titan fight by putting it at the front of the floor. Yada, yada, yada. It's pretty decent. I will say rank 3, where it generates a Welder Helper, can be a bit awkward since you need the ability to be killing your own imps, essentially, so you can be getting the bonuses from the imps and then making enough capacity that you have room to play out the imps the next turn. Additionally, I don't think Welder Helper is amazing in Monster Train 2. If it did its fusion effect from Monster Train 1, where it gave armor to the whole floor rather than just armor to the front unit, I would like it a lot more for a number of reasons, not least of which being that you could more meaningfully still play it out in front as a chump blocker when generated by Queen. But yeah, on the whole, Imp Parade 3 is a bit clunky, can be good. Sometimes it's really nice to have essentially 2 chump blockers every turn while also be scaling up your entire team. Generally, though, I'm much happier to stop at rank 2 and cross path, or only go 1 rank into it and cross path. All in all, I don't know, Imp Parade, it's a C or a D for sure. I think I maybe put it at D, but it's the value it gives when cross-pathing is rather nice. And that makes it a little hard for me to put it at D. Yeah, I think looking at what else is in D, it probably needs to go up. Also, Overlord maybe needs to go to C. I do think it is better than what else is in this tier, but we'll come back to that. Royalty, this being her rally path, the one where she gains additional attack power every time a unit is played on the floor. It's pretty bad. Again, technically better than Monster Train 1, but that's a really low bar. It was atrocious in Monster Train 1. In Monster Train 2, with the changes to capacity, it is easier to get, it's easier to put her on the floor and just kind of leave her there scaling. And also with heavies having as much HP as they do, having 1 large attack from her is like kind of okay. Also, with the addition of equipment, you can like potentially give her multi-strike and you can give her quick more easily and in more clan combos. And like that sort of kind of is okay. On the whole, it's still really bad. Of note, technically, it's kind of cute in Under Legion because the Fungi can rally her to get really high attack. The problem is that you still need a way for that high attack to be relevant. And that clan combo does not have access to trample. And there's like 1 way to give her multi-strike plus void armament in the equipment arms merchant. But even so, it's not great. Like, it can do some work, but it's not often going to be your game-winning kind of thing. Anyways, I'm going to put it in an F. Maybe could warrant D. Probably not. It's pretty bad. Anyways, on to Imperialist. The actual good queen path. I mean, Imp Parade is not bad, but like Imperialist is solidly great. Imperialist being the one that gives her an activated ability where she can kill all imps, deal damage per imp to enemy units. She also has like reasonably decent stats. Also, the fact that this got changed from a resolve trigger in Monster Train 1 to an activated ability is a big and helpful change. Also, not sure where to say this, so we'll say it now. Weirdly of note, the way this is currently coded, despite being an ability, it is the one ability that is not blocked by Spell Shield. It still counts as Queen's kills, so it's not like the imps themselves are doing the damage, like when Pyre Shot has the Pyre attack, which is how it like gets around the Spell Shield. Like, no, it is her that's doing the ability. It just, for some reason, it's an oversight that it is not blocked by Spell Shield. I don't know if they're ever going to change that at this point, because it seems to be enjoyed. But it is weird and notable. Anyways, I mention all that because it is nice as a way to be killing like Purified Souls, which a lot of other like ability-focused decks can struggle against. The main thing about this is essentially what you're doing is you're giving yourself a constant, easy way to sacrifice your imps while still converting them into value. So you pair it with like Fledgling Imp or Welder Helper or whatever, some version of Endless Imp or imps you keep generating off of like Imp Parade or Imp in a Box or Impsicle. and then you get their value and you throw them away and you do good damage. And it does do good damage. At rank 2, it is 40 per imp. At rank 3, it's 60 per imp. It's not going to kill like all the heavies for you, but I don't need it to kill all the heavies. I need it to kill the backliners and to free up capacity for me to keep doing my imp things. And it does that well. Come on, cat. Here you go. It's either C or B. I think it maybe warrants B. Because it is actually like pretty solid. It's a decent amount of damage. Oftentimes when you're using it, you're sacrificing like 2-ish imps per turn, which is kind of a free like 80 to 120 damage on every enemy. And again, imps themselves are a reasonably good strategy still. Again, a bit weaker than Monster Train 1 because you can't fuse them together, but even so, still good. It's somewhat self-contained if you cross-path into Imp Parade. Yada, yada, yada. It's just a pretty solid path. I think I'm willing to put it in... I think I maybe want to put in B. Again, it's a bit of a tough sell because I'm looking at what's in C. And I'm like, maybe Metalworker needs to go up to B. Maybe Enduring Steel needs to go up to B. Brewmaster also maybe deserves B. I think Metalworker and Enduring Steel probably go to B, at least for now. I think that feels maybe a little better. Anyways. Oh. I think only 7 more champions to go. God, I've already been going for like 3 hours. I knew this was going to take a long time with how much I yap about these things, but didn't know for sure how long. Regardless, next up is Rector. Rector is pretty heavily skewed, I will say. He definitely has taken a hit in the transition to Monster Train 2. Starting out with the Burn Bright, this being his burnout path, I think it needs higher stats. It's okay as is, but with the increased HP of enemies, it doesn't fulfill the same role that it did in Monster Train 1. In Monster Train 1, it was enough HP and enough attack late game that it could survive multiple waves pretty much without any assistance. And when I say multiple waves, I mean like half or more of the battle pretty nicely, with basically no support. And it would still do enough damage to kill a heavy or at least heavily damage a heavy. Now, that's a little weirder. Again, enemies are dealing more damage, and especially going into like Dominion Seraph, who builds up ever-increasing corruption. That high HP doesn't mean a ton. Also, if you set up badly into Savagery Seraph, the melee weakness can take a huge chunk out of you. And more to the point, it's that the 200 attack for a unit that wants to be a frontliner puts you in a weird position. On the waves that have like chump blockers, you're wasting 200 damage into a chump. On the waves that don't have chump blockers, a lot of the heavies in the late game are going to survive 200. Which is not great. It's fine, and obviously you still can, like, buff Rector. There are ways to do that, like Wax and Spike works nicely, Hallowed Halls works nicely. Also, one nice thing about Burn Bright is that if he does burn out, you can reform him potentially, and then he comes back with all of the HP again. So, like, there are some decent things you can do with Burn Bright, but it's not great. It's okay, but it's not great. And again, it sort of has that like early game potential, but You have to play around the burnout kind of weirdly, where if you're playing him at the wrong time or in the wrong way, you can go into Relentless without your champion, or with your champion not doing much for you. With a little bit of burnout extension, or with like any reform though, he will largely solo the early bosses. So like again, there is some value there, but on the whole, Burn Bright is just a bit weird. I think it deserves D. Again, maybe an argument for C, but I think D is where it belongs. Now we move on to Accumulator, this being the Harvest gain attack and HP path. The problem is it's just bad. More to the point, the problem is that, well, the problem is multifaceted. The first issue is that Accumulator doesn't have great base stats. And so a lot of waves, both early and late game, can do enough damage to kind of cripple Accumulator before you even start scaling his HP. And that can be a problem. Harvest in general can be fairly slow to scale, at least if you're trying to like scale off of enemy deaths. You can scale off of your own deaths, but if you're doing that, then that kind of moves on to the next point, that the one major thing that Accumulator does is it builds up HP. The damage scaling is pretty terrible. The HP scaling is very high. But if you are doing Harvest things, a lot of what you tend to do with Harvest is like killing your own units. And in Remnant, one of those units gives stealth, which makes the HP on Rector Flicker basically irrelevant, because you're just not getting attacked anyways. Or if you're just doing a bunch of chump blocking in general, again, the health doesn't really matter, because enemies are attacking into your chump blockers in the first place. Like, I don't know. It's just, what you need out of Rector, what you need out of like a Harvest champion is you need something to help you get Harvest rolling. And Accumulator doesn't do that. It is incredibly slow offensively, and the defense that it generates is just not that important on the whole. And again, there are other champions that do both like high defense at the same time that they're doing high offense. And again, if like Remnant were a clan that had ways to like capitalize upon the high HP, like if they had equipment like Banish does with Winged Shield, where it deals revenge damage equal to his HP, like that would be a payoff. But there isn't anything like that in Remnant. Again, obviously you can get that sometimes when being paired with Banished, but if you were doing a random clan combo, you're not going to be seeing that all that often. And even if you do, there's no guarantee you're going to be seeing Winged Shield anyways. Technically, it does have a cute interaction with Equalizing Rings, one of the neutral equipment, since that sets his attack equal to his HP. That is technically a way to be getting high attack scaling off of his HP. But again, you have to be specifically like tracking that down, since you can't get that from normal card drafts after battles. You can only get it from armory spots or from Merchants of Arms. And even then, you still have to be doing enough harvesting that his HP starts building up, that then he can start doing meaningful damage. It's just a lot of hoops for him to still be generally pretty bad. Anyways, he goes in F tier. Now to the actual star of the show, which is Dark Calling. Similar to Imperialist Queen, this is one where his resolve trigger got changed to being an active ability. It is not quite as dramatic as Queen's change, but it is still way more helpful for it to be an ability, since it means you can activate it mid-turn. You can also activate it starting on turn 1, and so like get a unit killed, and then immediately reform them, start getting the bonus. Anyways, Dark Calling is legitimately pretty great for a couple different reasons. First off, it gives you constant access to reform, which is versatile and powerful. It allows you to use chump blockers more easily. It allows you to use things like tombs or imps more easily. It allows you to... It's a way of defense in that, again, every time you're playing out a unit that died, they're coming back at full health. At the same time, Dark Calling, in addition to the attack scaling of Reform, Dark Calling gives an incredible amount of damage scaling, particularly at rank 3, where it's 25 extra attack to both units that it reforms. So as long as you are reliably able to be reforming units, which can be a little awkward, but as long as you can reliably be reforming units every turn, Dark Calling gives you pretty good defense and a lot of offensive scaling. So, again, some weird hoops to jump through, but it's pretty solid. I would say Dark Calling probably warrants B. It is Rector's like one good path right now. Could maybe bump it down to C. Don't think so. I think it belongs in B. Maybe even A. I doubt that, though. I think B is more appropriate, especially looking at what I've already got in A. I think that's a lot more fitting. On to Sentient. Sentient is another one of those champions that I don't personally like all that much. But then again, I don't particularly love Awoken in Monster Train 2 in general. They're fine, but they're not really my thing. As for Sentient themselves, so for Explosive, it's an okay path. I don't even know what to say about it. I can't remember the last time I took Explosive. It's fine. I actually like using it a decent amount. And it is a potentially decent ability. It does a good amount of damage, particularly at rank 3, where it's 120 damage. That's enough to take off a pretty huge amount from heavies, or even kill some of the like weaker heavies outright. Well, not quite kill them, but do a good chunk of damage. It's not too hard to be triggering the Rejuvenate either, since you start with healing spells as Sentient's starter card. Plus, there's, a bunch of other ways in Clan, like Glimmer and other things. Plus, it'll proc at the end of the turn with regen. Anyways, it's a decent frontliner since she's got a bunch of HP. The damage from Explosive can be pretty decent. It's also nice that it helps with wave clear, since on those waves where you've got chump blockers, it will take out the chump blockers no problem. And if you're not up against chump blockers, she'll help chunk down the heavies. And yeah, it's a perfectly fine path. I think it probably warrants C. I don't think there's much more like nuance I can give to it. But yeah, we'll put it in C. I think it's fine. Now, cultivating. This being the Revenge, Cultivate, and draw an additional card each turn one. Again, Cultivating, little weaker in Monster Train 2, kind of. Only because Cultivate tends to work best when you're cultivating onto a single target, because you don't... The like weird part about Cultivate is that you don't have control over what it hits, mostly. Since it always applies to the unit with the lowest HP on the floor. So again, usually what that means is you want to be pairing Cultivating Sentient with just like one other unit. That is still pretty doable with Awoken, since you've got access to 2 different sweep units, and you've also got access to like Animus of Will, which has innate 3 attacks. Obviously, there's other clan options as well. Like if you're with Lazarus, you've got another sweep unit. You've got Plague Doctor, yada yada yada. With the higher HP of enemies and the higher damage of enemies, I will say cultivating is a little more awkward in Monster Train 2. The scaling, it's a bit slow, at least for you to rely on it as your primary scaling. If you're pairing it with other scaling, like it can do fine. You do need to keep her HP up, since if she drops down, she'll start cultivating herself, which is fine, but not great. It's not really what you want when you're trying to like cultivate onto a sweep unit so they can get the wave clear that you want. But it's fine. I think this is probably another like solidly C tier thing. I'm not like hyped on it, but it's fine. It's scaling. It's extra draw. It's a big bundle of HP. I just think that there's a lot of other champions that are providing a lot more for you than that. And then for Bristling, again, Sention's a pretty basic, kind of boring champion. There's not too much to be said about Sentient or about Bristling, or really Sentient as a whole. It's got spikes. That's what it does. There's the tried and true strategy of throw her bottom floor, let her kill backliners, and then forget about her. I really hate using my champion that way, but it is an option. Anyways, I don't know. I think it's another C, maybe D. It's just really, do I want to put it on the same level as the other two? I'm going to put it D, I guess. I don't know. It feels maybe low, but I think that's what we're doing. I'm not going to think about it too hard. I'm a little fried. We've been doing this for several hours now. Moving on to Soul Guard. Hold on. My cat is starting to be a problem. All right, continue. So, Soul Guard. Soul Guard's pretty good. Again, kind of middle of the pack, bit contingent on champion paths, namely, or not champion paths, clan combos, namely in regards to Cold Channel. The others are a bit more self-sufficient, I guess. Maybe not self-sufficient, but less reliant on their allied clan. That said, to start things off with Dire Channel. Dire Channel, it's a bit weird. So, the problem is, there's basically no reason to take Dire Channel over Titan Channel. They have very similar damage scaling, since Titan Channel 3 is like 15 attack per shard when you bring him out of stasis, and Dire Channel is 16 damage per shard. There is some nuance there in that Dire Channel is working straight from the beginning, whereas Titan Channel, you do need to wait to bring him out of stasis. But I don't really care about that. Dire Channel it has the same problem as a number of other champion paths on this, similar to like Hiveminder or things like that, where it can do a lot of damage, but Stygian has a hard time like capitalizing upon that. The problem with Dire Channel is that it has an even worse time capitalizing upon things. Because like Hiveminder, you can potentially like give him trample, and then his attack power, like it's 1,000 damage attack, can now kill multiple units. You can give him multi-strike, you can give him multi-strike and trample. You can do other things. You can like give him Shield of Wing, you can use Cleave, whatever. Can't do any of that with Dire Channel because it's not using actual attacks. There's no way to make Dire Channel do more than kill like 1 unit per turn. It can definitely kill a unit per turn. It's just that oftentimes it's going to, because Dire Channel's HP is so low and bad, and Stygian doesn't have ways to like protect it well. That's not entirely what I mean to say, but all I mean to say is Dire Channel typically ends up being in the backline, and for good reason. And what that means is that usually Dire Channel is hitting a target for way more damage than was necessary, and ends up feeling like it's not providing a meaningful service to your deck. And again, compare that to Titan Channel, which has nearly similar damage scaling, but also is scaling HP at the same time. Yes, you do need to wait to bring Titan Channel on the line, and it's not contributing in the meantime, and it isn't building up scaling after you bring it out of stasis. Even so, I don't care. Like, Titan Channel is almost always going to be way better than Dire Channel for you. Dire Channel is another F tier here. Again, it can do a lot of damage. It's just the ways to convert that into something meaningful are slim. And like, again, you can have him do high damage, and you can sort of make the argument that like he wins Relentless, but like if you have enough power to be clearing the waves with your other things, you probably have enough power to be clearing your Relentless with your other things. Because again, like Dire Channel doesn't even like get the HP scaling that like other similar like whatever. It's just not good, is all I'm trying to say, and I'm getting hung up on it. Moving on to Cold Channel. This being the Revenge Apply Frostbite one. So this is, I don't know, I'd say maybe the champion path in the game that is most contingent upon clan combo. Because when you can utilize Cold Channel, if you can keep it protected, its damage output is incredible and not very hard to build around. But Stygian doesn't have a lot of tools in clan to support that, which means that you have to look to your allied clan. And some allied clans are really good at helping with that. Like Banish can do that very well. Valor is a great defensive tool for a frontliner. You also have access to damage shields. When paired with Lazarus, you can do a bunch of reanimate. You can also do regen if you want to. When paired with Umbra, you can feed morsels to buff HP. You can also stack tons of damage shields. With Hellhorn, you can get armor. You also potentially have access to like torches or other like self-damage pings, so you can hit the revenge trigger yourself more often. With Wurmkin, you've got a couple ways to scale HP. Again, you also have access to like self-damage pings. Like, there are some clans that can really heavily utilize Cold Channel. And then there are others that can't really support it. Like, Pyreborn is not great with Cold Channel. There are ways you can do it, but it's not easy and not consistent. So yeah, like, I would say that I think the amount of clans that can support cold channel well are greater than the amount of clans that can't. Even so, it is inconsistent for that reason. But when it's good, it's great. Like, it's very powerful. All that said, I'm going to put it maybe C tier. I think with all the words I spoke, I probably have to put it in D tier, even though I personally think it probably belongs in C tier. I think let's put it in C tier. Anyways, moving on to the Titan channel. We already sort of talked about Titan channel. It's basically just Dire channel, but better. It scales damage. It scales HP. You can pop it when you need it, whether you need to pop it on an early turn to help with the wave clear, or you need to pop it later to start soaking up damage after one of your backliners has already tanked a bit, or you need to wait for Relentless or whatever. You can even just like troll Savagery by sticking him on a floor to count as the floor not being unattended, even if he's in stasis. Like, it's a decent path. It's pretty solid. You can get really high stats. Again, Stygian has a bit of trouble converting that into something meaningful, but it still is pretty solid. I'm going to put it in C as well. Oh, only 4 more champions to go. Now, on to, I was going to say one of my favorite champions. I don't actually know if that's true. I think that's maybe true. But anyways, it's Spine Chief. Spine Chief is very good. Again, one of the best champions in the game. Starting with Decayer, this being the Inspire Reap path. I'm going to tell you right now, it's going in S. It is, alongside Little Icarus, one of the 2 champion paths in Monster Train 1 that could just consistently and relatively easily solo an entire run. That is harder to do here, mostly because bosses have dramatically inflated HP, and so it's much harder to kill with a big burst of Reap. But also, again, because of deployment and other reasons, you don't have to do that. The point being is that Reap is pretty strong as a mechanic. And so being able to apply AoE, exponentially scaling damage, while also like getting all the benefit of the cards that you're actually playing, is very good. It's also pretty consistent since you start with a bunch of infused cards, since all your starter cards are infused. Again, unless you're playing Pyre of Dominion, but Pyre of Dominion is Pyre of Dominion. And then add to that, there's a number of ways to be generating like more than one charge per card, or to be generating charges without playing any cards, like with Forgotten Trades, Revenge Trigger. Also, at the same time you're inspiring, you can be powering up other things in the clan, like Keeper of Echoes or Shard Soul Carver. Yada, yada, yada. It does a lot of damage. It solves your wave clear needs. Even has pretty solid stats, since like you've got an okay amount of attack and a lot of HP. It's just really good. As for Corruptor did get a little bit of a nerf going into Monster Train 2. Doesn't scale damage quite as much as it used to. Now I believe it's 15 per shard at rank 3 instead of 20. Even so, still quite good. Again, it is floor-wide scaling and a lot of it. I will say, where I would have put this in S in Monster Train 1, I am going to put an A in Monster Train 2. Largely just... So, it's still very good. Deployment phase helps it quite a bit, as does the changes to capacity and like Smidgestone and all that. I will say the higher enemy HP and the nerf to it does make it a fair bit weaker. But even so, still a great path. It's just that I do think it's a little overshadowed by Infector now, which did get a pretty hefty buff since it now goes up to 4 attacks at rank 3. Also has higher stats. Infector went from being the good but not good enough path in Monster Train 1 to being, I think, probably the best path for Spine Chief in Monster Train 2. Having 4 attacks means that not only are you proccing the strike effect more times, the strike effect being to generate a charge, but it's also 4 times damage multiplier on any scaling you do, which is very powerful. And then obviously being 4 distinct attacks means you can also kill 4 separate enemies. Also a lot of just like great pairings for Infector. Both in terms of like units like Keeper of Echoes and Chartzel Carver. Even something like Kinoho's Carapace can do decently with Infector, since you can like drain the charges and then immediately have Infector fill them back up. There's a bunch of artifacts that work really well with Infector. Also pairing it with equipment like Everlasting Light for the strike trigger, or for Iron Tongue to give it sweep so that you are proccing the charge generation strike even more times. Like, there's a lot of powerful things you can do with Infector. And like the addition of a stack of multi-strike and the ability to pick up equipment is just, it's all powerful bonuses. Anyways, absolutely, definitely belongs in S tier. I do think it probably deserves to go back to multi-strike 2 rather than multi-strike 3 at rank 3, but whatever. On to Talos. For the longest time, Talos was definitely, like Echo, one of those champions that people were constantly complaining about. I do think, again, I think even more than Echo, I think people finally come around on Talos for the most part. The main strength of Talos is that a lot of what she's doing is kind of independent of whatever else your deck is doing. The fact that she has innate flight means that she can overstack a floor freely. And so you basically don't have to consider her in your plans whatsoever. I mean, that's not quite how I want to say it, but the point is that you don't have to build around her for her to contribute strongly, is essentially what I'm trying to say. Which, again, I think is a lot better than people give her credit for. Again, she's often not going to be like the star of the show, but she's going to provide pretty strong value just kind of for existing. On that note, to start things off, we got Battle Cleric. This is the one that gives Valor on Resolve. So she is buffing the attack of your entire floor and also giving some defense to the front unit. It's not bad. I think probably B sounds right. Maybe could even be A. I think B is correct. It doesn't have quite the highs of her other paths, but it does always contribute. And it allows you to be a little more flexible than like Enchantress, where with Enchantress you want to kind of commit to things early and kind of stick with them. Whereas Battle Cleric, you can be a little more flexible and pivot more easily since you're not trying to utilize a Celebrate trigger. It also has the best like early game among her paths, though mostly Banished is strong enough as a clan and she's strong enough as a champion that you can get through, any of her paths can get through an early game pretty decently. Even so, I think Battle Cleric probably deserves B. Next up is Celestial Radiance. That is her shift melee weakness path. This one is a bit weird. It's good. Again, I think people kind of overrate it. But yeah, I'm not sure what to say here. Here's the deal with Celestial Radiance. Even though you don't start with any shift, like, you don't start with Just Cause like you do with Fel, so you have a lot less access to shifting right off the bat. Even so, there's still a lot of ways to be reliably shifting regularly and often with Banished. That it's not that hard to build into Celestial Radiance, even with no starting shift cards. Here's the part that gets a little weird, though. I'm not even sure exactly what I want to say here. I think on the whole, Celestial Radiance is pretty strong. The amount of melee weakness it generates, if you are shifting regularly, is pretty incredible. If you are not shifting every single turn, though, it can be a bit awkward. Because yes, it does generate still a lot of melee weakness, but it generates it in a burst. And that's not always that helpful. Like, yes, you can like load up a bunch of melee weakness on flying bosses, and that's cute, and sometimes you get flying kills easily. It's way easier to do on like lower covenants, like in the dailies. I don't really care about that. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Covenant 10. Sometimes when you are generating the melee weakness in a burst, it is way more than you need. And I would much rather have consistent power output rather than those bursts of strength. That is kind of my issue with Celestial Radiances. I think a lot of people focus on that burst potential and or the ease with which you can get flying kills on like lower Covenant. And I think look at it to be a bit more universally helpful than it is. All of those caveats aside, it's still a very good pathway. And it does deserve B or A. I think I'm going to put it in B. I think it's also partly just a personal preference. It is a good path. I can't really say too much negative about it. Because even what I was complaining about is not really an actual problem with it. Anyways, we got Enchantress next. Enchantress being the celebrate, gain permanent stats path. I don't know where I want to put it. I'm not quite sure that it warrants A. Especially considering what else I've put in A. I think that does mean it goes in B again. Though that feels a bit wrong because it does... I will say that Enchantress is better than her other two paths. I know there's a lot of people who think that Celestial Radiance is far and away her best path. But I do think it can be easy to overlook or underestimate like how much extra value you're getting off of Enchantress. But like stats are stats. And particularly the amount of HP that she gives, meaning that you are much more easily... You can much more easily avoid taking like defensive upgrades at Merchant of Steel. You don't need to worry as much about setting up like intrinsic defensive solutions even when going into like Savagery. Your units will very easily just survive the melee weakness and the sweep. Like all of that is really nice. She doesn't give like a ton of attack to your units, but even that still ends up being fairly meaningful. And also like, yeah, it's just stats are stats, and she can give a lot of them to a lot of units. And also similar to what I was saying before about permascaling Herzl, if you start permascaling a unit, you can start duping that unit, and you can get even more value out of what you're doing. It's already a very good game plan to be duping an upgraded unit later in the run. And so having that unit be doubling even your permanent like stat gains is also great. Anyways, point is, it's a very good pathway. I do think we're still putting in B, though. even though it feels a bit weird to put all 3 of her paths right next to each other. Okay, only 2 more champions to go. And we have Tethys. So, first up, we have Chillwind. It's not going in B, I'm just bringing it on screen. Chillwind is, I think, somewhat underwhelming. It's fine early game. She applies Frostbite on strike, that's it. And while early game, that means that you're basically guaranteed to kill bosses because the Frostbite keeps compounding, similar to what I was talking about with Spore Singer Lion's Mane before. It's the same idea. You go into the boss, the Frostbite just keeps ticking. Technically, the Frostbite is also vaguely helpful early game against like the heavies, but they don't do a whole lot of damage even if you leak them, and oftentimes, if you are relying on the Frostbite, you're still gonna... Point is, it's just not terribly incredible. The one nice, very notable thing about Tethys, though, that I need to not overlook, is that she is a 1 capacity unit. Making her, more than any other champion, aside from Talos, incredibly easy to slot onto a floor. Since you start with an odd amount of capacity, and so most banner units are 2 capacity, and so it's very easy to fit like banner unit, Tethys. So it's not the worst thing to have Chillwind just kind of sitting there contributing. It's just that I don't think she's going to be that great. At least not if you're like building heavily into Chillwind. It does get a little better if you're cross-pathing Chillwind with Handheld Totem, the path that gives sweep. But again, with the inflated HP of enemies in Monster Train 2, the amount of Frostbite she'd be applying, because at best you go to Chillwind 2 and then Handheld Totem 1 in that instance, in which case she's got 30 attack and applies 25 Frostbite. She might actually have slightly higher attack factoring the Handheld Totem. But either way, the point is she's applying 25 Frostbite, which against like 500 health enemy is not an insane amount of damage. Just not that great. And you're, for the most part, doing fairly comparable work by just building more into Handheld Totem while also getting more melee or more spell weakness. Anyways, it's kind of underwhelming. I think I'm going to put Chillwind down in D. I think her other paths are okay, but Chillwind, there's just very little reason to ever take it comparatively. Again, technically, it makes you stronger early game, but like, whatever. Next up, we have Conduit. Conduit being the one that reduces the cost of damage spells on her floor by an increasing amount. Also, she now gets Conduit as well, because Conduit is now an actual status in this game, or buff, I should say. Conduit's great. Conduit Tethys is solid. It allows you to build your deck differently. You can take damage spells more freely. You can avoid investing in minus cost while still building like a powerful incant deck. You can also avoid taking Ember upgrades more easily and more easily focus on draw upgrades, which again is very useful for like an incant deck in particular, which is a lot of what Stygian wants to be doing on average. So I like Conduit a lot. The question is it A tier or is it B tier? And again, I think looking at what else is in A tier, it's maybe a bit of a tough sell for me. Maybe. Again, it's a little weird because I'm not organizing between, like, in each tier. So, like, I can see things in A tier that are what I would consider close in power to Conduit Tethys, and then other things that are definitely above. Like Mad Scientist, definitely above Conduit. But like Celestial Spellweaver is definitely closer. Anyways, I think I'm willing to put it in A tier. Although that does create another line which on screen pushes F tier down below screen. Whatever. We're just going to live with that. You know it's an F tier already. And they deserve to be shamed anyways. Lastly for Tethys, we got Handheld Totem. This is a path that gives sweep. And on strike, she applies spell weakness. And then also, new to Monster Train 2, she has an activated ability to draw a damage spell and grant it magic power. Meant to combo with the spell weakness, of course. I'm not in love with this path. And it's definitely partly a playstyle thing. So I'm trying to be fair to this. Handheld Totem definitely is a B or C tier one. I personally would lean towards putting it in C. I'm not sure if that is too much of my own bias, though. To talk through it a bit, here's the deal. She has pretty bad base stats. Also, while sweep is good, Stygian doesn't have a lot of ways to capitalize upon it. Like, there's no in-clan way to be scaling up her attack power, so you are totally contingent upon or reliant upon your allied clan. Mind you, there's a lot of ways in your allied clans to be buffing. But also with like 2 other sweep units in clan, I often would rather be buffing them if like sweep and buff attack is my plan. And if sweep and buff attack is not my plan, I would still generally rather be building around like the Sirens, in which case I would value Conduit a lot more highly for its ability to help me with like an incant deck. The spell weakness on strike is fine. It can be powerful. And again, like if we're talking lower covenant and like dailies and things, like it's way more potent there. Where bosses have lower HP and you're also heavily incentivized to try to seek out early kills for the score bonus. I think I'm going to put it in C. I think that's probably right. Like, there's still a lot you can do with the sweep. The spell weakness can be good. Stygian has a couple decent things. One of the things that really held Handheld Totem back, at least in Monster Train 1, at least with the DLC, because it was good pre-DLC, but especially with the DLC, the game really encouraged you to be setting up on top floor, which meant that if you were top floor with Handheld Totem Tethys, then you would never get a chance to utilize the spell weakness because any enemy that escaped your floor would then go to the pyre immediately. Obviously, there were ways to set up mid-floor, even so, it was less good. That is not so much an issue in Monster Train 2. Monster Train 2 definitely encourages you towards bot or mid-floor much more commonly, and so the spell weakness is a lot more relevant than it is in Monster Train 1. Anyways, all this said, I think I'm still putting it in C. Okay, last champion. Finally, we are on to Wilden 10. Personally, one of my least favorite champions. He's not bad, per se, kind of. I wouldn't call him particularly good, at least not on average. Like I said right at the top of this video, he does get dramatically better when paired with Pyre of Savagery, as does Awoken as a whole. Just having the inbuilt scaling for a sweep champion. Not that all of his paths have sweep, but obviously, you can cross path into it pretty reliably. Anyways, a champion that can have sweep and multi-strike and quick, that benefits pretty heavily from the slay perma damage scaling. But without considering that you're going to have Pyre of Savagery all the time, I do think Wilden 10 is a lot weaker. Thornlord is pretty decent. The stings are okay and can combo pretty nicely with a number of things. Like, they work well with incant units, of which there are a fair few new ones in Monster Train 2. Like, a lot of the clans have them. Also, with how many waves have like chump blockers, the 10 damage stings are still doing enough to kill the chump blockers a lot of the time. Also helps with like the trials, the invasion trials specifically, since you can set up on a lower floor and then still have a burst of stings to help kill the trial enemies. Also, Thornlord has inbuilt scaling, and it's a fair bit of inbuilt scaling. Awoken, it's also nice that it is independent scaling, which is to say, like, you still have to play things on Wilden 10's floor, but again, you don't really have to be like focusing on Wilden 10. He'll reach a pretty decently high level of attack, kind of no matter what you're doing, even if you're focusing on other units. So, all in all, I think I put Thornlord at B. I don't think it warrants A, but it's a pretty solid path. Strangler is a weird one. Strangler is kind of best value is that it's cross-pathable, so that you can turn Thornlord into a sweep unit, or you can turn Predator into a sweep unit. Honestly, rooting enemies is often more trouble than it's worth. It can be nice to prevent you from taking pyre damage, but so often I would rather just take the pyre damage and not worry about trapping a bunch of units so that they can start wailing on me again. Also, if you're not doing enough damage to be clearing enough enemies, it can cause problems by forcing newly arrived enemies to spawn on the next highest floor if you run out of unit slots on the rooting floor. Can even force bosses to ascend to a higher floor doing that. It's just not great. It's not what you want to be doing. I think personally I want to put Strangler in D. I think maybe it still deserves C, though, because the cross path is pretty good. And also, you do still have to take into account that sometimes you're going to have Pyre of Savagery, and like Strangler with Pyre of Savagery is rather good. It's boring, but it is pretty good. I think those 2 points are good enough to warrant it C tier. And then for our last champion path, finally, we have Predator. This being the Enchant Quick. Though it also has Quick itself, so unlike Gilda's Enchant, he does also benefit. At later ranks, also gains Multi-Strike, which is pretty nice. Again, not the most interesting champion path. Wouldn't hate seeing it be reworked. Oftentimes worth just taking one rank into Predator. But yeah, quick to a whole floor is good. Can be awkward because Wilden 10 himself is so large. But again, changes capacity helps that, as does Smidgestone. Not to mention clans that have ways to overstack. Again, it's really just, is this B or C material? I think we're going to put in C. I think we're going to put it in C. And now is the part where I've been doing this for so many hours that I kind of want to be done, but I also feel like I should review and see if there's any changes I want to make. I think for the most part, I'm pretty happy to leave things just kind of where they are. But let's do a quick pass through. I think S looks pretty solid. I think all of those definitely deserve to be there. I think for A tier, looks pretty solid. Maybe Conduit is too high, but I think Conduit probably deserves it. It is a pretty solid path. And Stygian on the whole is a good, versatile, pretty powerful clan. And Conduit meshes well with a lot of different clan combos. For B tier, I know people are going to be mad that Maneater is there. Feels weird that we have all of Talos' paths there. I think B tier looks pretty good, though. I do think Mystic Hammer looks probably better down in C tier now. Shellsmith may be a bit low, but I think is fine at C. I do think Pyromaniac maybe deserves B, but is probably pretty sufficient at C. Brewmaster also probably deserves B, but we're going to leave it at C. I think the rest of C is pretty solid. D looks pretty reasonable. I do like Overlord Phoenix, and I think it's a little deceptive having it in D. Which is to say, I think it looks more critical than I actually am of Overlord. I think Overlord is not actually that hard to make work, and the payoff is pretty strong. But it is a little inconsistent. It is certainly worse than its other two paths, and there are a lot of champion paths that are just better and more reliable than it. So I think that is enough to warrant a D. Penumbra is lucky not to be all F. I mean, again, there are some points that I do think Penumbra deserves, like the early game reliability, but even so, just a bad champion. It's not even a fun champion, it's just a bad champion. And then, yeah, down in F, we've got Architect, Royalty, Accumulator, and Dire Channel, and I think that's pretty fair. Maybe Architect could go to D, but if we've got an F tier, something's got to be in it, and I think that's it. Anyways, this has been a long video. I hope it's been entertaining. I hope you enjoy. I am going to go eat some food and stop talking. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you agree or disagree. Regardless, hope you enjoyed.